Hello, everyone. I'm Erin Autin, Senior Director of Research at Zpryme, and welcome to our third annual Solar Storage Fest. We hope you're all having a good summer so far, and Solar Storage Fest is sort of Zpryme's summer celebration. So thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us. Just a few notes before we get started. Remember to interact with your fellow attendees, which I see a lot of you doing in the chat already. Let people know where you're from, what you're interested in learning about. Share your LinkedIn profile so you can connect. And ask questions of our panelists. We will try to get to some audience Q&A at the end of each session. So ask those questions to the panelists. And all sessions will be recorded, so don't worry about missing anything. And finally, social media. Share that you're participating today on your social media. Post any quotes that you hear, anything interesting lessons you learn. If you tag Zpryme, we will reshare. And we're also hosting a social media challenge. So if you share a picture of a sunset with the hashtag SSFSunset, and I think we'll throw that in the chat for y'all to see, tag Zpryme, we will be picking a random winner at the end of the event. And the prize will be a $100 gift card along with an annual pass to Zpryme events in 2022, which will most likely be going back to physical events. So you'd get a pass to all of those, including ETS 22. So with that, I'd like to introduce our CEO, Jason Rodriguez. Jason, thanks for being the driving force behind SSF as always. And what are you most excited about today?
Hi, Erin. Hey, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Yeah, there's so much that we're going to go through today, but I think just kind of hearing where the conversation at and how far it's come just in the past 6 months, we're really going to get a sense of what the industry thinks, how far both this nexus of the integration of solar, whether it's residential or utility scale, and how that matches with the ramp up in battery capacity. So I think I'm looking just to get that feel for, how far can we go this year and what are those key things holding us back? Obviously, there's several factors at play. You got resilience, you got a new administration that's pushing through a big infrastructure package and how that impacts deployment. So I really want to walk away with today. We're just trying to get a better feel with what this next 6 months is going to look like, probably more at the national level. How about you?
I think everything you just covered. We're also going to be touching on equity. So we've got a panel talking about solar equity, and then the movement of green banks that kind of serve that LMI customer. So I'm interested in hearing about that. And you mentioned resilience, Jason, and I know you're going to be having a conversation with Frank Almaraz from CPS Energy. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to you to have that conversation with Frank on resilience, renewables, and innovation.
All right, thanks. Looking forward to opening up there. Hey, Frank. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Looking forward to our conversation today and looking forward to your presentation as well. Frank is the Chief Power, Sustainability, and Business Development Officer for CPS Energy. We're very excited to have you here. For those of you familiar with SSF, Frank actually kicked off our first official one in 2019. So it's a pleasure to have him back and really talk about some of the journey CPS Energy has been on in regards to some of the things they're doing both on the generation side, renewable side, and how they're going to continue to innovate there in the city of San Antonio. So Frank, I'll let you get right into it. I know you have some slides to present, and then we can have a short discussion afterwards. Also encourage the audience to put your questions in the chat, and we can see if we can get to a few at the end. Does that sound good?
Sounds fantastic. So thanks for having me back. Excited to be here. It's funny because you think about being in front of an audience and looking out into the crowd and seeing familiar faces and things. And it's not as easy to do here, but I do see some familiar faces just kind of at the top of my screen where you have the Brady Bunch at the top. So it's good to see those of you that I recognize. I have some slides to share, and I will do that. I'll actually, try to keep an eye on the chat too. We'll see how good of a job I could do with that. And as things pop up, maybe I'll be able to have a look as well. So I'm going to share my PowerPoint here. And, I do have some slides, but I really don't want to take the entire time with them. So I'll go a little bit fast. And if there's questions, then we can come back to it, but sort of looking forward to the dialogue. Okay, so yeah, look, Jason introduced me. I'm the Chief Power Sustainability and Business Development Officer with CPS Energy. So I have responsibility for our power generation fleet, as well as our gas and power trading. So we're responsible for fuels and then how our units interact with the market. I'm additionally responsible for our efforts on the sustainability and climate front and our business development efforts as well. So, everything is about doing what we do in a responsible way, whether that's responsible financial management or responsible decarbonization of the grid. We are an entity that's owned by the city of San Antonio. We operate for the benefit of our customers now and, as a perpetuity, for the long run. So everything has to be done in a measured way. And I would say that measured doesn't mean not innovative. I mean, I think that we have demonstrated our ability to innovate and adopt new technologies and programs when they make sense. We have moved from a past of monolithic power plants at central stations. Some of those exist today, and we're going to own and operate them as best we can, once again, for the benefit of our community. But they're all will end their lives at some point. And we are today, as some of those plants retire, whether that be Deuley a few years ago or our gas steam units, of which we have, 1,700 megawatts of capacity that will retire in the next few years. We've got to continue to add capacity for our growing community. So a couple of years back, Paula introduced our flexible path, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But ultimately, it is balancing that portfolio of existing central station generation units with solar and wind and storage and a two-way bidirectional grid at some point. That flex power bundle, which is in evaluation phase now, and again, I'll talk about more in a minute, that's the next step along the flexible path. And a really critical point here is that the velocity of all these things makes a big difference to us. Technology, the speed with which price falls and efficiency rises will be a primary driver of our ability to adopt technologies. So we're watching them and adopting them as they make sense for our community. I'll just point to a couple points along the timeline here. As I mentioned, 2018 is when we launched our flexible path strategy. And not long after that, we announced, or we took action on the retirement of our Deuley coal plant. That's an activity that was many years in the making. We announced it many years prior. It takes a long time to transition an asset like that, to plan for it, to plan and make it so that our workforce is not negatively impacted as we kind of balance all of our objectives. We achieved our step goals at on time and under budget and sooner than expected. We, by kind of 2020 timeframe, had reduced our NOx emissions by 78% and our SO2 emissions by 97% post that Deuley retirement. After that, we kind of launched into our Flex Power Bundle, and that also required a lot of planning. It's a really big, really big effort, and to execute on it successfully required commensurate planning and communication with our stakeholders. And just a reminder, as of 2010, we were about 39% gas, we were 32% coal, 16% nuclear, and 13% renewables. That's the column on the far left. On the second from the right is what we forecast to be about that time frame in 2040. We said in 2040 we'll be about half gas, we'll be about 14% coal and 21% renewables. But we have two kind of alternate perspectives on the world. There's that 2040, as though we had planned using our regular integrated planning processes and used thermal generation as we had previously as the backbone of our portfolio. In this alternate world, the world that we're planning to today, which kind of is it represents our flexible path. By the way, if anyone gets really bored or like to have reading that will put them to sleep, we have all of this is posted in a great deal of detail on our website. It's called a Flexible Path Resource Plan. It's a big document, and it really pulls it all together. So if anyone's interested in that, you can go look at it. But it describes in great detail what we see here in the far right column, which is a world where we're 50% renewable, we're 16% flexible gen. That's really the firming capacity. We'll talk about options for that in a little bit, with some remaining gas, coal, and nuclear, and 5% storage in that 2040 plan. As I said, we have a lot of capacity that's going to retire over the next few years. Browning 1, 2, and 3 specifically, gas steam technology, there are 1960s vintage technology. They have served our community really well. We use them today. They are producing power for our community this summer. I was looking at our little board there that told me exactly how much every unit is producing. Our Flex Power Bundle was crafted to replace that capacity, those megawatts. Those units have primarily run during the day and during the summer. And as we think about the capacity that our Flex Power Bundle would bring, it would bring capacity that's primarily during the day, during the summer, 900 megawatts of solar, which is an enormous amount of solar. Really excited about that. 50 megawatts of storage and 500 megawatts of all source firming capacity. We started out calling that gas because we think of gas as the technology to beat, whether that be a combined cycle or reciprocating engines or something like that. But we recognize that it's not the only technology, and we wanted to be sure that the market is able to bring forward-thinking solutions to us, and we can compare those against our technology to beat. Well, when you put that all together, you've got around a summer peaking day, about 500 megawatts of firming capacity, 50 of storage, and about 450 of solar, which is just about 1,000 megawatts. Now, 859 from Browning with some growth over the next couple of years, replaced by 1,000 megawatts of summer capacity. It's essentially how we came up with that. So as we launched off, we know that communications was really important. We wanted to make sure that everybody all across the world who could be a good partner would see the request for proposal, and that we were talking with our local community as well about how we think about trade-offs and what this portfolio should look like. So both to advertise the RFP and get really good responses that would be competitive and bring the best value to our community, but also to talk with our community about what we value. And you can kind of see that here. A lot of business press coverage. We had videos. We translated the RFP into many different languages. We had teletown hall events, and kind of pushed this information out to make sure that everyone knew. And in response, we had 100 companies submitting 650 unique proposals. Now, some of these are different combinations of projects. You've had about half of that are distinct projects, and people put them together in different ways. They formed consortia. They did a lot of different things to try and be responsive. But you can see that it was not just the United States. Now, primarily our respondents were in the United States, but we had some others from North America. We had a bunch from Europe and some from Asia as well. We are now in the evaluation phase, and we're thinking that we ought to be able to enter into negotiations to make awards in the fall. One thing here that we're thinking about, there's this pretty cool program called the Shining Cities, and we would like to see ourselves move up that list. We are down on the bottom left. You'll see a table. We are number 5 today. We'd have to double that to be number 1. I'm not sure that that's something that's going to happen, but it's a worthy goal to try to move ourselves up that list. And we have line of sight to some projects that would be local that potentially do. So we think that's a pretty neat objective as well. Okay, a lot of talk about summer days and winter days, and I'll just put a chart up for everybody. This should be fairly well-worn territory for most, but I'll point out that on a summer day on the left, and this is supposed to be 2025, summer on the left, winter on the right. The vertical bars are our capacity, and the band of lines, that line graph, is our customer demand, kind of a lower end and a higher end customer demand. On the left, you can see summer day. This is across one single 24-hour period. In the evenings, it gets a little bit close, and we are certainly relying on our intermittent resources, just like our gas and coal resources as well to produce. But right when that peak is going to be, it's going to be in the morning in Texas. On the right-hand side, you see the winter day. Now, the first thing to point out is that there are 2 peaks, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and that makes sense if you think about what your own household and business might look like, where you sort of ramp up in the morning, you turn on your appliances, you get that coffee maker going, you might fire up your toaster oven, all that kind of stuff in the morning, and in the evening, you're getting home, you're taking care of all the things you have to do at the house, and you can see where those 2 peaks come into play. I want to stress that these 2 are average, weather normal days, and we'll talk about what happens when the weather is not normal here in a second. But suffice it to say that whereas on the right you'd see 2 peaks and they're lower than the chart on the left, Winter Storm Uri showed us that those peaks can be at the same or higher than what we've experienced in the summer. And there are implications to this, which we'll talk about. Now, I've just said we're going to add a lot of capacity of solar and a lot of solar capacity. We've already got a lot of solar. We've got a good bit of wind too. And to do that well and to make sure that we're meeting our needs of our community, we're going to need a significant amount of firming capacity. So it's the 500 before. Future flex power bundles will include probably additional firming capacity. So we saw some neat technology as part of this RFP. We taught the title of the slide says alternative technologies. That used to mean solar and wind, but we don't think of it that way anymore. These are mainstream, we rely on them as part of our portfolio. So it's interesting that now we're talking about alternative technologies that look more like compressed air energy storage, liquid air storage, where we super cool air so that it becomes liquid. In the end, you're making potential energy out of kinetic energy one way or the other. You're either winding up a flywheel so that it will release, or using your energy to super cool something or to pressurize something. And ultimately, that's kind of what all these technologies represent. We looked for technologies that have as much proven as many of the component parts working together that are well worn and that we've seen demonstrated elsewhere. And then you're really looking then about how the whole system integrates and what the life of that system will be. But CASE is something people have heard of. I think all of these. I'll tell you a couple of technologies that don't appear on the slide. One of them is geomechanical pump storage. So you're compressing, or you're pushing water, a non-compressible fluid, into the earth, and compressing a geological formation that you can then use to power a turbine later, which that's pretty cool stuff. I'm also excited about some advanced geothermal that we've seen. also not on the chart, but pretty cool technology too. You think of geothermal as pouring water on hot rocks and you get steam out of it, but that's not what we're talking about these days. There's potential to use, what might have been an unrecoverable geothermal resource and be able to produce significant base load and even ramping capability out of it. So lots of really neat things that we've seen. I do see a question, is a two peak day, second peak happening around 9 or 11 p.m.? That's earlier usually. It's, as the sun's going down in the winter, it's probably more like 6 or 7 p.m. Okay, so back with 2021 in focus, this winter storm Uri. We think that we asked ourselves, okay, is the flex power bundle as we have it currently constructed really what we need to be doing? Or do we need to do something different? I think there's a logical question that says, if solar is known not to produce much in the winter, then you need to have backup generation or additional capacity to supplement for it. And if that capacity is available in the winter, then it is also available in the summer. And if that's the case, then isn't that all just redundant capacity when the sun is shining? It's a logical question. I think that there are reasons why we think that solar continues to be a really critical part of our portfolio that I won't go into here. I think that this crowd has a feel for this, but it nonetheless is a logical question that we have to answer. So we looked at the flex power bundle and we said, ultimately, we're going to continue ahead with it as it is. We're going to put this in front of our board. There'll be some discussion about it. We expect it. We ought to move forward as we have indicated on plan. But it is certainly, it being the winter storm, a prime mover in our thinking about portfolio construction, how we de-risk the ownership of intermittent resources, how we supplement and build around it so that we maintain this diverse portfolio. Also, the regulatory environment is always a roll of the dice. We've got a letter from the governor to the Utility Commission directing them to take certain actions. We will almost certainly see changes to the ERCOT market structure that may cause us to have to pivot on what our current plan is. I don't see those things necessarily impacting the flex power bundle as it is, but it will definitely play into our thinking for the next iteration. But once again, as we think about all of our decisions, they are on through these many lenses: reliability, customer affordability, security, safety, environmental responsibility. All of these things are critical components that we're pushing all of our decision making through. I didn't say resiliency, and all on a foundation of financial responsibility. I already said we're kind of on timeline. This is information that's generally available. Later in the year, we'll be discussing the contracting with our short list of awardees, and then maybe late this year we'll be getting back to the larger bundle and getting those contracts finalized and put in place. Okay, that was a lot of content. I sort of blazed through it. It didn't go as fast as I wanted to, but love to answer any questions.
Sure. Thanks, Frank. I think there was one, if just a real quick one, if you had any comments of how that ties into the San Antonio climate resilience and climate ready plan. I know CPS was heavily involved in that.
Right. So our current flexible path resource plan that I see just got dropped in the comments or in the chat here. Thank you. That will drive us to an 80% reduction of CO2 by 2040. And as such, that end state is well aligned with the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. Our flexible path predated the CAP, but we were pleased to see that it is in alignment, and our board actually signed a resolution of support for the CAP with knowledge that our flexible path does achieve the CAP goals by 2040.
Got it. Yeah, I'll go ahead and take another one here.
Hey, Jason, one thing I do want to say, I'm sorry. It says comments on SA Climate Ready, Climate Action and Resiliency Plan. Well, the Climate Action plan. It's called the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, not resiliency. But I'm not saying that to correct James. I'm pointing out that resiliency and adaptation really are, to me, they feel pretty synonymous, which I think is really
Yeah.
wonderful, because resiliency is a key word of utility folks like me, but something that's been come into the public consciousness a whole lot more after the winter storm. And I think there is a great deal of common ground between resiliency and the adaptation pillar of the CAP. So I'm excited. I've spoken with local leaders about this, with Doug Melnick with the city about this, and I think there's a good deal of room there to work together on the things that achieve both of those goals.
Thanks. Yeah, you mentioned like there's the customer attention there. So ramping up and all this change is happening relatively fast, kind of looking back into the way centralized generation went up, and you plan for 50, sometimes longer years to have those assets. So now we're in a situation where we have to ramp up. Well, most utilities, progressive ones across the ramping up renewables relatively fast, but at the same time, customers are just used to the reliability at 99.9% in some cases. So how do we balance that out and find some common ground from a customer expectation standpoint?
I think, Jason, our going assumption is that customers don't want to be out of power very much, and especially when things are really hot or really cold. There is an assumption about how many outages are permissible, and that kind of is foundational to the market design. But that's a debate that needs to be revisited for sure. So our mandate, again, is to balance against all of those pillars. Reliability and resiliency are 2 of the 6, and we're going to be focused on portfolio construction that makes sure that our customers have power when they want power. Now, again, we're connected to the ERCOT grid. A lot of, there are folks who don't think about this every day, who don't realize the implication of being connected. On the one hand, when CPS Energy needs to take outages and we need power in our community, we can buy it from the grid, and that's a good thing. Otherwise, we would be, having to have outages within our community, just are limited, within our borders. On the flip side, we can have more than sufficient generation running at full out and not be able to meet the needs of the state all at one time. ERCOT may not have enough capacity in whole, and that would result in outages, not just everywhere else, but also here in San Antonio. All that to say, we have taken the position that we're going to have more generation capacity than just that peak. We have a little bit of reserve margin in order to meet those needs. And I think as it pertains to ERCOT, they are also taking actions, adding ancillary services targets, increasing those so that they can buy additional capacity. They're being more aggressive about communicating plans for the upcoming weather, as CPS Energy is as well, making sure that our customers are well informed. We've been a lot more proactive about that. We had a storm that came through yesterday. It just sort of blew through, but even still, we were having conversations. We were sending out mass notices to our customers to be sure that it didn't catch them by surprise. We think communication is critical, and aside from the planning work and the improved weatherization that has to happen in the state, and the mechanical and other things that we're going to make sure we implement, communication is critical.
Got it. Good question here from Travis here in the chat about ancillary services and how that might change as renewables increase penetration on the grid. Maybe for frequency controls. I'm not sure if you can see that question in comments.
I can, yeah. Right. So we were talking about ancillary services, like a future changes to ancillary services in ERCOT, before Winter Storm Uri. Right now, there's a lot of focus on additional procurements of responsive reserve and non-spin reserve. But the issues that go along with making sure that we're integrating intermittent resources or non-spinning mass, those haven't gone away. So I expect, as Travis points out, a need to modernize the ancillary services, both adding capacity and also changing up some of the requirements and maybe new categories of ancillary services. That right now is a tool that ERCOT has, but you know, it's early days. I mean, it feels like it's been so long since Winter Storm Uri, but it takes policy and market design, you know, some time to adapt. And they had not adapted yet, even to, you know, solar and wind. Those all got to come together here.
Yeah. Yeah, so we only have a few more minutes, but I want to ask you a quick question on the two peaks and that new reality and how that's going to maybe change up the, you know, how you integrate some of the newer technologies, whether it's solar storage or maybe some of the other ones you had talked about earlier. How does that change the game specifically here in Texas or for CPS Energy?
Right. So I think that our goal is to push forward with a diverse portfolio. The future is uncertain in a lot of ways. Not only is, you know, with the weather an uncertainty, but legal, regulatory, policy, market design, all those things are uncertain, and we're not picking winners and losers in terms of technologies. I don't think that's a place that our customers want us to be. So we still have to plan for that diverse mix, and we think that even with knowledge that solar is just not going to produce much in the winter at winter peaks, it still remains an important component of our overall portfolio. Storage doesn't solve the problem either, because at least you know, what people think of a lot of storage as 4-hour, you know, lithium ion battery storage, because that's only 4 hours and you can't charge it once you're in an energy emergency alert, a load shed situation in ERCOT. So it's got to be long duration storage to supplement, and we have to get smarter about the fuels that we can provide a resilient supply to us, or on-site storage. And that doesn't, you know, historically that's meant coal or nuclear, but, you know, given what we need to do as an industry, those that we have will keep, but we have to add new capability on that front.
Got it. So last question, we have about a minute left, but I did want to just kind of end on just getting, you know, your take. You know, the flex power bundle, the 900 megawatts of solar, 50 megawatts of storage, and 500 megawatts of all source capacity. At the end of the day, you know, how does this really help San Antonio, bring San Antonio into a brighter future?
Look, I think we are so proud to be able to be forward thinking and not be focused on kind of next quarter's results and that kind of thing. We have a long history, whether that be water from the Edwards aquifer that we don't use because we have cooling lakes that we built all those years ago, to adding 400 megawatts of solar in, you know, early this prior decade. We see where the future is going. We have plans to meet the objectives of the decarbonization, and to do that, it's going to require adoption of a lot of what used to be termed alternative technology, but really are meat and potatoes technologies for us today. And we're going to continue to adapt and innovate to make sure that our customers are well supplied, not subjected to market price volatility, undue market price volatility, but are also reducing our carbon, air, and water emissions profile.
Got it. Fantastic. Well, Frank, we appreciate your time, and thank you so much for coming and kicking off Solar Storage Fest. You know, God willing, we'll be back in person next year. But we applaud the work you guys are doing. We know you guys got a major challenge on your hands, but it sounds like the right strong strategy in place. So thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for having me. Thanks to everybody for listening to me ramble a while. Really appreciate it. Nice to be with you.
Have a good one.
Thanks.
Well, we just heard an amazing opening there in terms of the flex power bundle that CPS and CDF San Antonio are moving forward. Now we're really excited to take that conversation to a step further to talk about solar equity, which has become at the top levels of conversations around the clean energy movement. And with that, to lead that conversation, I'm excited to hand this conversation over to Joyce Deuley, our Senior Research and Content Analyst, who'll be leading that conversation. Joyce, over to you.
We were in a separate room. There we go. All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Joyce Deuley. I'm a senior research analyst here at Zpryme. We're about to kick off our solar equity panel discussion with a couple of amazing human beings. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties, so we're going to allow that to happen. But it's going to be a very exciting topic. You know, equity is top of mind following the pandemic. Well, we're still in the midst of the pandemic, but the issues that kind of arose as a result of what was going on back in 2020 and still 2021 is that even though renewables are coming onto the grids faster than ever before, there are still people who are kind of left out of the conversation. And so I'm very excited to bring up Jason Pittman with Big Sun Solar, Mary Palmer with Autin Energy, and Safiyyah Khan with Perch Energy. It's going to be a fantastic discussion. So I guess, Chris, just give me a little nod when we got all of our ducks in a row. Oh, yes. Excellent. Okay, I see people. This is going to be great. Before we really get started, though, I would love to have our panelists introduce themselves just a little bit. So, Mary, would you like to kick us off?
That one might work better without the mute. Sure. I work at Autin Energy. My name is Mary Palmer, and I am an environmental program coordinator. Do a lot of program design, making sure that the strategic goals that we have can be supported by the operational resources that we have. That's my favorite spot, is making those two connect. And so I'm very happy to be on this panel. It's good to see you guys.
Oh, we're so happy to have you. Thank you. Safiyyah.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here in such the presence of greatness with all of you. I work for, as Joyce said, Perch Energy, which is a child company of BlueWave Solar. So I still am associated with both. We are two Boston-based companies that work. BlueWave is a large developer of community solar programs, and Perch Energy manages community solar customers for various investors, as well as BlueWave's customers. And there's also a B2C arm of that company that's kind of a technology software product that we're new at. And I also co-lead and manage a lot of our social impact and anti-racism and equity type of work. Both companies are working quite a bit on trying to solve low-income solutions for community solar and how to work more closely with our communities and the very topics that we're going to discuss today. Thank you.
No, thank you. And one of my favorite humans, Jason Pittman, is joining us today. Jason, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Hey, thanks, Joyce, for helping me boost my confidence level on this. I'm Jason Pittman. I live in San Antonio, Texas. I work for a company called Big Sun Solar. I would say over the last 5 to 6 years, I've deployed a couple of solar programs down in San Antonio that really focus on low-income households. We have lots of kind of lessons learned around deploying those two programs. And I'm excited to talk about it today and just kind of really focus on where equity falls in renewable energy.
Awesome. No, I think it's going to be a fabulous discussion. And clearly, Robert Meggins, your counterpart, is super jazzed. I don't know if you guys saw him fist pumping, but I did. And that's definitely how it feels today. So let's dive right in. You know, as you know, equity issues have been highlighted as a result of COVID-19, exacerbating some of these existing problems. Safiyyah, why should communities care about solar equity?
It's a combination of things, but for one thing, in our space of renewable energy and energy in general, we need to be mindful of the fact that the communities that have been most dramatically affected by the maleffects of fossil fuels are also those environmental justice or frontline communities are also the ones that have historically had the least amount of access to renewable energy of any kind. They're also facing all sorts of other intertwined environmental justice issues. So I think that that's really on us as an industry to figure that the both prongs of that problem out.
Thank you. Mary, what's your take on it?
Goodness gracious, sorry guys. I absolutely agree. I mean, if we're not proactively addressing equity, then we're just perpetuating injustice. And from a public utility perspective, it's really important that we ensure that there is inclusive participation in city programs and fair access to all of our customers. And so I'm immensely proud of the rebate program that we've had for residential customers since 2004. However, 60% of Austin residents are renters, and there is a racial disparity in home ownership. So expanding our programs, right, to really shift the focus onto equity really creates a vehicle for customer engagement and helps us just to facilitate a just transition into the clean energy future.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Jason, would love to hear your perspective too.
I think I definitely agree with both of them, with just one slight difference. The way I think about it is that municipalities and utility programs, rebate programs and other solar programs are funded through the rate structure. And so all of the customers are paying for these programs. And so I think there needs to be more programs available that can help more communities adopt solar, right? So the way I think about it is one size doesn't fit all. A rebate program may be very generous, but it's not going to work for everyone. Mary just mentioned renters, right? So if you don't own your roof, you can't put solar on it. So a rebate program doesn't really help you around solar adoption. So I like the idea of lots of diverse programs, lots of different ways for customers to learn about solar and then adopt solar if it's right for them.
Fantastic. So, you've worked in the solar industry for a really long time, Jason, as an engineer and as a thought leader. What are some of the additional challenges that add to the complexity of equity in the renewable space?
Well, I think the biggest one is what Mary just said, and I'm hoping I don't take her answer later, but it's really, a few years ago, we tried to put free solar on people's homes, and it was difficult because, like Mary said, 60% of people in Austin are renters. And so when you look at the availability and the barriers around solar participation, that's a big one. The families that we identified that own their homes, their roof was 15 years old. So it was, it's hard to put a 25-year asset on a roof that's going to be replaced in 5 years. And then there's things around code compliance. A lot of the older neighborhoods, their service panels are not up to code. They have beautiful shade trees, which is great. We don't want to remove those, but those are all barriers to rooftop solar participation. I'll let Mary and Safiyyah kind of finish those thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, Safiyyah, would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I feel like both Mary and Jason have been kind of really teeing up the idea of community solar really well, because you're highlighting a lot of the impediments with rooftop solar with renters and urban communities and low-income communities. I'm sure we'll talk about that some more when we talk about types of solutions. But a couple other things that come to that are on my mind or our collective minds as well is, for instance, in community solar, even to go get, which is a bit more accessible for these communities, there are still hindrances with things like we may have households where customers feel very vulnerable to disclose things like sharing their utility bills or maybe being open to some sort of background check or credit score. There are language impediments with that we encounter often. There are trust issues. People don't want to, they're afraid of disclosing accidentally that there may be illegal immigrants in their households or something, so they don't want to participate in a state-run program. Things like that, where there are these latent trust issues with certain communities that have been well-earned and developed. And then also, I think we really miss out on addressing Indigenous and Native American communities in a lot of our discussions.
Thank you. Mary.
I mean, I'm just going to be piggybacking on everything that's been said so far. And I do apologize. I'm experiencing a couple network issues, so I'll probably need to turn off my camera for a little bit of the discussion. So I'll go ahead and switch that off. Oh, that helps. Okay. I mean, in a word, what additional challenges are I mean, I think both have mentioned cost and balancing the effect that it has on all customers, right? So when you hear solar equity, we're generally discussing one of two things. increasing solar adoption for homeowners, or using solar as a means to lower the energy burden for low to moderate income customers. But sometimes those goals can come into conflict with one another. So both incur an additional cost. Autin Energy is well positioned because we're vertically integrated, meaning we sell energy into the market and are able to recover some of our costs. Therefore, our customers do not have to bear the full cost of the utility, but that's not the case for all utilities. So sometimes when programs are instituted to help offset installation costs for homeowners, those costs are then distributed to all of the customers, including non-solar and LMI, who already pay a disproportionate percentage of their income on energy bills. So it's really important to understand, like Jason said, there's not a one size fits all solution for everybody. Every utility is different. And you have to take a step back and really design programs carefully to make sure that we're expanding access to solar, but doing it responsibly and not creating any additional burden for our customers who can't bear it.
No, very good points. This is just a quick reminder to those of us who are in the audience. Please, if you have questions for these powerhouses, drop them in. We definitely would love to maximize their time in the discussion at hand. So kind of thinking about like the program building, I know this wasn't in our initial lineup of questions, but as someone who's kind of built programs in the past, what are some of the key things that need to be considered when approaching these programs for communities? Safiyyah.
I think one of the biggest lessons we have learned in the recent past is to start with the communities, that they need to be at the center of the policies that are created to even decide what should be happening in their communities. We need to incorporate their input on their values, their cultural identities, the locations of, so for me, community solar, or even things like wind projects, those things need to accommodate the community's ideas of where they should be located and how they should be implemented. In the past, I think as an industry, we've tried to solve problems with people who are not from those communities, and we create policies and we create solutions and then try to kind of plug them in a really well-intentioned way, but we really miss a big part of where how we should be approaching those problems.
Thank you. Jason or Mary?
Mary, would you like to go?
Sure. Oh my goodness, Safiyyah, yes, you're right on target with that. And I think in addition to including the people who are experiencing the problem and the creation of the solution, it's also really important to get a clear delineation of the priorities in the beginning. So say, for example, you want to expand community solar program and you're working with a stakeholder to identify key goals, such as minimizing additional costs to customers and being close to the city. It's really important to rank those priorities upfront and to plan in advance for the scenarios in which you have to choose between your goals. So, for example, if you have to choose between a lower cost project or one being closer to the city, which one wins? And I only say that because once you have that decision-making framework in place, it's much easier to make those hard decisions when people's emotions are running high or you're in the middle of having to make a lot of decisions for implementation, than to do that in the heat of the moment, and then it just derails a lot of the efforts that you've made to get to that part so far. So
fair enough. Thank you. And Jason?
Yes, let's see. I'll answer this question a couple of different ways. The first one is, if you want a successful program, you really need to partner with you need a credible partner. The reason I say that is because, rooftop solar or community solar, most of the households, either renters or homeowners, they're first-time buyers. They've never bought solar before, especially if you're thinking about solar equity programs. So they're unfamiliar with the technology. They've never bought it before. They may or may not know anyone who has ever bought it. And so unfortunately, the way that the solar market is kind of set up in Texas, there are some very aggressive companies that use very aggressive sales tactics. And I think it's difficult to roll out a program and really gain the trust of the community if you're not partnering with someone like Austin Energy or CPS Energy, because it just brings a level of credibility to the program, and it just makes it easier to deploy. I think about successful programs having some type of value stack. I think just, building a solar farm in the outskirts of town and trying to either sell it as a community solar facility or just putting a lot of rooftop solar on, it doesn't always pencil out. And so I really like the idea of trying to find a secondary or ancillary value, which is something that we did in San Antonio with our Big Sun Community Solar program. We leveraged the value of covered parking to lower the cost of solar to make it more accessible to more households. I think innovation is what's going to drive it. A successful program. I like the idea of letting the community find ways to lower the cost and bring it to more neighborhoods.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that. And as somebody said, been fortunate to go and check out your facility or the project that you've been doing in San Antonio. It definitely seems to be working on that end. Mary, do you have an example of how, some of these projects are working within your community?
Yes, so we have a community solar program, and in that situation, the way it works, we have a subscription model. So people subscribe to offset the cost, their consumption of their energy, and half of it, because right now the cost of renewable energy is a little bit higher than traditional energy. So half of the project, people are paying a premium to participate. And the other half is being allocated for our low to moderate income customers. We call them CAP customers. And we're fully subscribed. We're looking to expand the program. We're very happy to partner with organizations. But like Jason mentioned, there's tons of real market barriers to really explore and try to get overcome. But we're working to expand that. So.
That's awesome. And Safiyyah, do you have a really cool pilot or a really cool project that you want to point to?
I'll say that we've been trying for years to solve how to best bring low-income communities into community solar and vice versa. And we're just starting to get there. I can probably talk about some of the hurdles more than I can talk about the successes for right now.
That's all. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, and I think you wanted to get to some of these later, but the industry has tried to solve some of that at a state level by policy and regulation, and there's still hurdles with that about how much do we have ownership over and how much of the economic benefit actually gets, again, put back into the community. Even though low-income communities spend a much higher percentage of their income on their energy bills, they're still not technically going to save that much that they might always feel like it's worth it for them to benefit from a community solar membership. Making the rewards out of the job training and the job satisfaction that may happen by bringing projects into their communities. One of the things that we are piloting for a project in particular is to look at how can we get the credits back to them more easily without some of the hurdles that are involved with credit checks and credits and things like that, so that we can do some more direct deposit onto the customers' utility bills, and also use technologies that are available for us to help pay their bills. Those are things that we're kind of testing out right now. A hurdle that still exists within all of that, though, is that for us, being a developer and sort of an administrator of those customers and managers, that we still have stakeholders to manage of our clients, and we need the help of regulation and policy to make these programs appealing to those investors or clients as well as passing that benefit back on to the customer.
As part of that, need to sort of work with the policymakers, do you see that some of that is starting to shift more in your direction as more renewables get added or become increasing options for communities?
Yeah, the change that's very visible right now is that the amount of incentive that's coming back to customers is a bit higher. We're seeing a lot more focus on it, where more projects are having these additional LMI, adders, so that there is more of an incentive. There's still a lot of room for improvement, though. There's still a lot of barriers there's attention and there's progress, but there's still a lot to be solved.
Fair enough. You know, a couple of you have kind of touched on this, and I would love to hear a little bit more in depth about how partner ecosystems really play a role in creating a more equitable future. You know, we talked about bringing in the communities, but there's lots of ways to collaborate to make some of this happen. Mary, from your perspective, you know, how important are your partner ecosystems in making this happen?
They're very important. I mean, engaging the business customers and getting those extra value adders that stack, like Jason was mentioning earlier, are critical to adoption. You know, really figuring out ways, for example, business customers, you know, there is a really big emphasis on being a green or a sustainable company, right? And so maybe the cost benefits won't actually pencil out in some situations the way they want to, but it will add additional customers, right? And so figuring out ways to use renewable energy to substantiate green claims like LEED or US EPA, increases adoption at a level of scale that we can't really achieve without that customer segment. And that's just one example. And so just figuring out ways to be like, okay, how does this add value to you? Maybe in the example of the carport, maybe this helps you to get more income, generate more income at your facility because people are willing to pay a little bit extra for carports or whatever. So just being creative and I think really relying on other values besides just wanting to be environmentally friendly, for sure.
Fair enough. Jason, we did have a question kind of around this for you. I think some people understand maybe Big Sun Solar's background as a startup within the San Antonio community, securing some pretty interesting partnerships with CPS Energy. You know, can you speak a little bit to partnering and working with CPS to implement community solar and maybe some lessons learned for other municipalities and co-ops?
Sure, you bet. You know, I'll say the first thing is just there. I think currently there's a trend where utilities and municipalities are going out and looking for very kind of big, broad ideas on how to create, implement, and then manage these different programs, right? And so I think 5 years ago, most of the kind of requests for proposals that were coming from utilities and municipalities said, you know, I have this, you know, closed landfill. I want, you know, 20 megawatts of solar, and I want you to point it towards a community solar program. I think today there's lots of examples where utilities and municipalities are saying, instead of, you know, asking people to build a project, they're saying, here are our problems, right? We have a low-income community that's been left out of our solar programs. You know, here are our goals. How do we reduce energy burden by a couple of percentage points in these for these families that make below, let's say, 100% of the AMI? Here's all the data we have. Bring us your idea on how to do that. I think that you're going to get companies and developers that understand the importance of reaching out to the community, like Safiyyah mentioned earlier, and trying to design a program around their needs and submitting some really innovative ideas. You see it in Austin, you see it in San Antonio, you see it in other parts of the state. So I'm really excited about that. You know, we followed a similar path for CPS Energy. You know, we had an idea. I think that some of the lessons learned on our other kind of what I would call utility integrated programs, we wanted to try to solve those. And so we had an opportunity to submit a proposal for this Big Sun concept where, as Mary mentioned earlier, we leveraged that the value of covered parking to try to really push down the cost of going solar. And they ended up selecting us. You know, doing a program like that, you have to keep in mind that any MOU, any municipally owned utility is giving you access to their customers. And so customer service is really important. You know, you can't swing and miss at that. That's something that will follow you around for the rest of your career. So we quickly turned from a solar developer to a customer service company, right? Because we understand the importance of customer service and user experience for CPS Energy and Austin Energy. And really any utility, you know, it's always at the top of the list. And then there's the technical side, right? I saw a question in here about implementing community solar into billing software. You know, that's not something that you do overnight because of all of the cybersecurity challenges around that. And so, you know, so now you go from originally being a solar developer, right, to a customer service company. Now you're a software development company, right? And so how do you integrate all of these things together? And then after that, you're a marketing company because you have to sell it, right? And then you're a construction company and an asset management company, right? And so you really have to, you can't push any of those things down to the bottom. They're really all at the very top. They're all important. If you, like us, we have decided that we want to help utilities across the state integrate solar programs in ways that are financially responsible for their customers. If that's your approach, like it is ours, you have to put all of those challenges at the very top, and you have to do a great job delivering on the product. Let me see, I think that, yeah, so I think that answered James' question. Let's see, Anita asked about different customer programs. You know, 4 or 5 years, I guess it was 5 or 6 years ago, we had the free solar program that I was with a different company, and we deployed it in the San Antonio community, and it was great. However, we realized that it was flawed. There were too many households that were disqualified for some of the reasons we talked about earlier. The roof was in bad shape. The roof faces the wrong direction. They have beautiful shade trees that we're not going to cut down. Their service panels not code compliant. You know, from the lessons learned there is where we came up with this. We wanted to decouple the community solar asset from the roof. And so that's where we went with the carports with Big Sun, and it's been a huge success. Let's see, Anita, I'm just reading the rest of your question. You know, whenever you remove the asset from the roof, it really opens up the number of households and businesses that can participate because you've gotten rid of that whole home ownership criteria that Mary talked about earlier. You know, selling the energy directly to the utility, you really get rid of that whole credit issue from the customer because now the utility is buying it. I think that answered all of Anita's questions. I'll stop there and let Mary and Safiyyah speak.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. And appreciate you spending some time making sure that we fully answered the questions for the audience members. Safiyyah, do you have anything to add to the partner discussion and maybe some of the opportunities or challenges that arise with partner collaboration?
Yeah, thank you. 2 things. One is that for us, when I hear partner, I often think of implementation partner. And for the implementation partners, there are very rare cases for us in the Northeast anyway. There's one partner of ours who really specializes in these communities, and they have a dual model. They're called All-In Energy. They have a dual model of specializing in bringing both community solar and energy efficiency to frontline communities. They have bilingual staff, and they also have sort of a job development program where they're ensuring that people from those communities have job opportunities and entryways into the industry. I think looking for partners like that or nurturing the development of partners like that in communities in some neutral way, a lot of these types of partners, from what I see, are nonprofits and rely heavily on donations, and there isn't yet a model for them to do this really important work without some sort of extra funding. I don't know the answer to that, but that's one aspect of what I see. And then finally, my other thought was about being, for us as an industry, to think about being more demanding on the whole supply chain, not just when like I said, I think of the implementation partners, but there are partners that are involved in production and acquisition of hardware and software and marketing materials and things, and we can be a lot more demanding on how do we orient what we need from them to also center equity from these partners of ours throughout how we're purchasing and supplying our programs and our services.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Mary, do you have something to add to the, maybe putting a little bit more demand on the supply chain?
No, I mean, I love what you said, and I completely wholeheartedly agree with that. it's definitely something that I think will add a lot more value to all the work that we're doing right now. And so I don't have anything to add to it, but I love their both responses were spot on.
Heck yeah. Okay, so clearly this is a kick-ass panel and we're having a great time. We did have a question come in for Safiyyah. Maybe apparently you guys were working on a pretty cool project last year. And so the question is, did the pandemic affect the, oh, nope, sorry, I'm getting my questions confused. So are there any updates or lessons learned from your community solar project with JFK Airport since last year?
Yeah, that's so sad.
Oh.
I'm really sad about that, because that has been, it was even before the pandemic that it's just been delayed a few times. My personal opinion, which is not an official opinion, is there are many, many stakeholders involved, and it's hard to get to a good consensus about what to do when we get on a decision-making call, and there are over 20 different stakeholders there, and we're just one of them. It's a super exciting project, and everyone's very much in love with it, and I would love to give an update on that in the near future, but I don't know when, so please stay tuned.
No, thank you for that. I think that, maybe this is something that everyone can relate on and maybe touch on, but collaboration is amazing and totally necessary in making this happen, but we can't have too many stakeholders or too many voices at the table. So there's a real balance that needs to be struck between, having the right people in the room, making decisions and weighing in, and then, who can execute on the collective results. Mary, do you have any lessons learned or best practices that you can share with us on how you undertake those kinds of projects?
Well, I mean, we having just opened, I did mention the Austin area, Austin Bergstrom International Airport just installed a solar system, which we're very proud of, but I can completely, that's why I was nodding so much. I'm like, yes, it's so much because there are a lot of stakeholders, and it is ultimately, although it helps with community efforts, it's an engineering project. And so some things even are just, you can or cannot do them, And so that's where I think, I mentioned earlier that framework, and that's what I think that sitting down in the room, you can't overplan. There's just no such thing as overplanning. And so thinking through, like, in this scenario, that scenario, this scenario, what wins, right? I think it's real easy to set goals, but we have to establish what the winning situation, like if these two things are at odds, what are we doing? Because of situations that what Safiyyah is describing, when you have 20 stakeholders in the room and they're all very passionate about something, you want to be able to point back and be like, hey guys, we already decided if it's time versus money, time wins. And you're like, oh, okay, let's move on, because it will happen, and it does create it. But I will say, in addition to establishing that framework, trying to maybe limit the number of stakeholders for some of those meetings. I mean, that's probably not popular for everybody because everyone loves to be in the room, but it can really inhibit progress. So just extracting as many of those goals up front, and then being like, all right, from now on, we have a 10-person team, and that's it. Like, we move forward. So yeah, I empathize with that for sure.
Yeah, having worked in a collaborative, like a civic innovation partnership perspective, just on trying to get a small event off the ground, let alone a massive undertaking between mission critical pieces like an airport as well as an energy infrastructure perspective, I imagine that it's quite the tap dance. Jason, did you have something that you'd like to add?
I think that they added everything. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else that I could add.
Fair enough. Okay, we did have another question come in. So we kind of mentioned how the pandemic really exacerbated or highlighted the inequity that's happening within solar, or at least, showed that it was even more critical to address. But the question that came in says, did the pandemic affect your community solar efforts in terms of getting people to enroll in the programs, or did it delay in implementing the programs, or did you see, an uptick in people pursuing community solar as a result?
Is that for anyone in particular?
No, not really, but Safiyyah, if you'd like to kick us off, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll start. I'm sorry, I'm on my phone, so I can't see the questions come in. But for us, at the very beginning of the pandemic, there was sort of a bit of a frozen moment for a couple of months where we were trying to figure out how do we support our communities and not necessarily try to sell them things, but just let them know that we're here, support their food banks, support their other organizations, these partners that we were kind of working with to as a form of acquisition and a form of community engagement, but we were trying to say, how can we be there for you now? That took us a while to do. And I think there was also a point, we see this during the holidays and things like communities, people, they're not thinking about energy at certain times. They're very front and center of their mind was basically survival in the pandemic for a bit. And then even I would say towards the latter half of last year, things were picking up quite a bit and we saw a lot of progress. We've seen, I'm in the Northeast, right? And so for us, Maine opening up its programs were a big deal and there have been some hiccups with that, but it kept moving. And we've also seen some other state like New Jersey recently expanded what they're planning on doing for community solar. So there has been progress for us personally. Our projects amazingly have not suffered, I would say. We've been able to fill them. People have been joining despite the pandemic, and that has been really awesome. And we're fortunate to have that reciprocal relationship.
Awesome, thank you. Jason, what about you?
Well, I'd like to group my response into two different categories, kind of positives and negatives. You know, like Safiyyah, the negatives from the pandemic were, like her, ourselves, completely froze for several months, right? People weren't thinking about buying community solar. And it's completely understandable, right? And so as a company, we had to, you know, we just had to just kind of wait it out, which we did. And we're proud of the fact that everyone within Big Sun Solar kept their job and we transitioned to remote work and we learned a lot from that. But sales came back eventually. You know, we did have a lot of supply chain issues, mainly around the steel that we use in our carports, right? Lead times, cost, all of those things were really impacted. And so we had to kind of work around that also. Fortunately for us, you know, all of the solar panels and all the inverters and all that, we had already pre-purchased all of it. It was just kind of sitting in a warehouse. But the things that we were, you know, that our business model for steel, it's more kind of like, you know, buy it when you need it and it shows up on site and you install it. So we had a lot of price volatility around that we had to work through, and we did, and we're really excited about it. A couple of things that happened with our company that I would consider, you know, positive in light of the fact that it happened during a pandemic, which is anything really positive. But we reached out to our customers through several kind of surveying events, talking to them about how they were doing, do they need anything, you know, their community solar credit is showing up on their bill, just really keeping in constant communication with them. And one thing that we learned from their responses is they wanted to get involved. And so how could they help the San Antonio community with their utility bills? And, you know, keep in mind, this is the same time that there's a lot of the disconnection moratorium going on, right? And so CPS had made a statement, Autin Energy followed, that basically said they're not going to disconnect anyone for late payment. What our customers told us was, hey, we want to help CPS Energy and we want to help those customers. What can we do? And so one feature that we're really excited that we rolled out is through our community solar platform is we now allow our customers to take a portion of their monthly Big Sun Solar credit, pull it out from their bill and send it to CPS Energy's REAP program. And so that's the Residential Energy Assistance Program. And it could be $1, it could be $25, whatever they want. It could be one time, it could be reoccurring. And so we were really proud of the fact that our customers wanted to support CPS and we were able to find a way to help them do that. And so now we make a monthly donation to the REAP program in our customers' name, which we're super excited about. The other thing that that we're proud of is that Big Sun took the 1% pledge, and so we donate 1% of our net profits to the community. And we have a restaurant in our building called Pinch Oil House. Joyce, I know you've been there because I think we've worked together. But it's almost like our company cafeteria. We're down there so often. And whenever COVID hit, downtown San Antonio completely cleared out, and all the restaurants shut down. And so what we did is we talked to them about what is your monthly burn for staff salaries, and we bought the equivalent through gift cards. And so we were able to cover their monthly salaries for just one additional month, just to keep their employees employed. So we're really excited about that. And then we turned around and gave all those gift cards to our community solar customers so they could kind of come down and try our favorite restaurant. So that's kind of how COVID impacted us. We had some challenges with the supply chain and with sales, transitioning to remote work, but we also felt like we kind of rose to the challenge with the REAP donations and also supporting the local community.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. Mary, what about you? How did COVID impact, your projects?
Well, like Safiyyah was saying, one of the main things that we were facing is how to be mindful in our communications. Here we have customers who are really facing hardships paying their bills. And so our communications team really had to balance, informing people about programs, but doing so in a way that is sensitive to the situation that's going on. And so we were not impacted. People really wanted to participate in solar. We saw an uptake in our residential rebates. We saw participation. We had a lot more inquiries about community solar. And it was great. I would say, well, it's kind of pro and con, is that we realized there are a lot of misconceptions about solar. Even with Winter Storm Uri coming in, people were like, oh man, if I would have had solar, then I still would have had power. And just recognizing like, oh man, okay, so that's not true. Like going out there and being like, okay, so we really need to like make sure we're informing people about what the real benefits of solar are. And I saw a question come in about the cost, and no, solar does not always pay for itself. In Texas, we have very low cost energy. And so for some community solar programs in other parts of the country, the cost of having community solar is less than traditional power. And so it automatically has a benefit. But in some places, like here in Texas, it costs more to have a solar than it does to natural gas. And so, making sure people understand like what values can be associated like with in having solar, and understanding what the return on investment will be in their particular geographical location was a challenge, but also great because we've never had this many people interested in energy. Like it's just not, we try to get people to come out and participate in our program design meetings and stuff. And it's like, you want to come to a city council meeting about energy? No, I'm not interested in doing that on Tuesday afternoon. Like, no, and so it's really nice to have this interest, because then the stuff that the programs we design can really be of the people, which is what we want ultimately.
Yeah, making solar sexy, or making sustainability sexy in a way where the consumers don't necessarily have to be the one crunching the math all the time. I was collaborating on a project with someone who was putting together a solar panel buying book that was pretty exciting. And some of those hidden costs and like how to project over time the value or the ROI for the homeowner on solar, if they really understand that their solar panels are working consistently, or whether or not they need to have maintenance done on them, or all these things, is we hope that it pays for itself, because it sounds like, oh, it's input and then you can put, have the output come back to you, but it's a little bit more tenuous than that. So the community solar programs are also super exciting, but again, there's who's going to manage that, where are you in the country, what stakeholders are involved. So it's definitely a beast. But to kind of roll back a little bit about what we were talking. Let me find my notes really quickly. For those solar providers who are really looking to get started in addressing equity within their communities, how do you suggest they get started? And we'll go with Safiyyah.
A few things. Thank you. I think one is, as we've all talked about, to start with the communities, and some specific ways of doing that, I would think, are there are already many other non-energy organizations working with these communities, whether it's about water and environmental injustice, whether it's about housing, whether it's about kind of job development. There are these economic development type of very local organizations already in the communities, and that might be a really great place to start. I would say, as we were talking about in the partner part of things before, look for partner. If you're going to be needing on the ground staff that you're paying, look for partners within that community and partners who are prioritizing these, prioritizing the idea of equity as well. So it isn't just about profit, but how are we giving back, ensuring that we're giving back to the communities. For us on the development side of things, when it comes to building community solar farms and projects, really include, or at the very least acknowledge, the indigenous or native peoples whose land we're building on. Include them in the conversation, include them in the process before we start building. That's been a learning for us to start doing that and just to learn how to do it well. And I certainly encourage others to do so. And also allowing, in that same vein of building the projects and finding the land to do so, locating it, having discussions with the communities about where they're located, and also really educating ourselves about BIPOC land ownership. We tend to lease a lot of land from farmers. There's plenty of data out there to show the racial inequities in land ownership and in farming. And we're also trying to come up with ways to build our solar projects in a way that we can encourage really innovative farming techniques, so that when we have dual use, we can build a project, allow for some amount of agriculture to be happening there. And that can work for a farmer who doesn't own land. We're doing this quite a bit in Maine right now and testing it out to allow farmers who historically haven't been able to own land to basically work on this land where we build a farm. Those are places, some of the places I would start with that.
Fantastic, thank you. Mary.
Well, I was going to say similar things to Safiyyah, which is great because I think that, you know, people are on the same page about this. So I guess I will add to, in addition to starting with the community and looking at your partners, I think it's also important to look internally. I mean, I think as Jason actually walked through in great detail, you know, when you're taking on a project of this, like for solar equity, you're not just, like, there's a lot of pieces. There's marketing, there's the rates, there's software, there's tons and tons of little operational details that go into it. And so I think having the big picture and then performing a very realistic SWOT analysis of like what do we do well, and then using that information to inform what partners do we need to make on this. You know what I mean? Where do we need to be like, you know what, we're not, like, for example, for Autin Energy, we are not software technology company, right? So that's an opportunity to be like, all right, let's go out and get somebody to help us with this piece of this, and to really take stock, because we want to, when you're at the beginning, you want to set yourself up for success. No one wants to launch a program and then have to come back later on and be like, oh, so sorry, we couldn't figure out this piece of it. So that, I think that's something that can be done tangentially with the community and the partnerships.
Awesome, thank you. And Jason.
I will say, to be successful, I'm going to go back to the user experience. You have to know your customer. You have to know your customer's customer. You need to understand the landscape of your community, and you have to really understand what barriers are preventing these neighborhoods from adopting solar. if you really understand the market, then the next step is you have to find a utility that is interested in launching a program and convince them that your program has merit, and that's obviously not really easy to do, but I think that persistence will pay off, right? If you have a good business model and you have a great program and plan, eventually someone's going to let you do it. Don't give up.
Awesome. Thank you. So we did have a question come in and we've got about 7 minutes left. So I think we can get through 2 more questions. The one that came in though has to do with both CPS and Austin Energy community solar plans. So these are based on rate plan subscriptions without any buy-in or long-term, or are they based on rate plan subscriptions without any buy-in or long-term commitments? And I guess, Mary, do you want to take a stab at that one?
I guess, sure. I'm not sure if I understand the question. Does that mean that the customer does not have to make a long-term commitment, or does that mean that does Austin Energy have a long-term commitment to the program? Or should I'll just answer both?
Yeah, I think just answer both.
Okay.
Why not?
So yeah, our program, the community solar program, does not require customers to commit. They can cancel as they would like to, and that's because we don't want to add any barriers. A lot of the research show that our population is really migratory, and so okay, perfect. Asking about customer commitment. Yeah, so then if it's a matter of a month or two, that actually like getting them on or off of a bill, but the customer could easily today say, I'd love to participate in community solar, and then reassess their finances later, or decide they're going to move to, I don't know, Indiana. And they can unsubscribe. So we try to make that as flexible as possible.
Awesome. Thank you. Jason.
Oh, let's see. I don't want to take sides, private ownership versus subscription models. The 2 CPS community solar programs that they've deployed over the last 5 years have both been what James is referring to as buy-in. So they're private ownership. Households or businesses buy the panels, they own them. They own them for the life of the program, which could be 20 years or it could be 25 years, depending on which program you're enrolled in. I'll say personally, the Big Sun Community Solar Program is a buy-in program. It's a pilot program that CPS deployed with the idea being, how do you really just take the most benefit for, let's say, low-income households, right? I think Mary's subscription program is great. I believe that subscription programs are really targeted towards households and businesses that are trying to lower their carbon footprint. And that's what it does. If you look at subscription programs across the US, some of them are at a slight premium, some of them are slightly in the red, right? So you're saving a little bit every month, or maybe you're spending a little bit more depending on where you are in the US. What we were really trying to prove out was, how could we have a community solar program that was buy-in, that it really, significantly lowered their bill, right? Just like rooftop solar. That's what we were trying to prove. And we wanted to see if, the value stack of covered parking really pushed down the cost of adoption to the point where you can get significant savings on your bill through a community solar program. And I'm proud of the fact that I think our team did that. Both of the models are great. We just wanted to see if we could make the buy-in community solar program work. And we think that we did.
Fantastic. Thank you both. And so, Safiyyah, I'll let you kick off our last question. We have 3 minutes left and definitely want to maximize the time. What are you most excited about? Like, if you could pick a project or a trend in the industry that gets you real jazzed, which would it be?
Well, honestly, what I'm most excited about is the idea of the oceans not being on fire. But apart from that, I'm also very excited about that at the federal level, there's been a merging of energy and justice and equity conversations and new jobs created at a very high level within this organization. That has me excited. And then this idea of taking a deeper look at our supply chain and starting to weave that into the equity conversation as well.
Yeah, both incredibly important, really relevant, top of mind things. Thank you. Mary, what about you? What gets you most jazzed these days?
I think it's two things. I think I mentioned this earlier, the fact that people are participating more. Like it is very important to me, and I know most of my colleagues, that the programs that we design are really for the people. And it's hard to do that if you don't know what the people want. And so the fact that so many people are actually participating in these energy conversations has really got me excited. And I'm also, I mean, like I said before, I'm a little bit of an operations nerd. And so I get really excited when people are willing to expand the conversation about programs to look at the little details, like, okay, so well, and how will this impact the rates, or how does this impact communications, or how does this, those, how do we make sure that the time from when the homeowner says they want to go solar to the time that it's on their house is as short as possible, and they have all the communication they need in one central portal? Like, those types of questions to me are really exciting. And so I look forward to working on that and really keeping equity in the forefront of those types of conversations.
Yeah, most definitely. Thank you. And Jason, what gets you most jazzed these days?
I'm excited about, if we go back to that value stack, how does corporate social justice goals impact renewable energy and solar equity? If you visit TEPRI, which is the Texas Energy Poverty Research Institute, they're there in Austin, Texas. They are working on what I think is a really innovative LMI, low to moderate income community solar program, where they are partnering with corporations for kind of on-site, behind the meter solar, and they are passing some of the savings on through our two low-income households through what they call kind of an energy stipend. I think it's super exciting. I'm kind of watching that to see how it works out. If anyone is familiar with TEPRI, you should go check it out.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, I think this has been a phenomenal panel. It has been a real treat speaking with all of you today. I can't wait for the next discussion that we have maybe at next year's SSF. So thank you very much. I'm going to pass the torch over to Jorge Ortiz and Rebekah Diaz from the Zpryme team to talk about Froliq and a super cool project. With that, thank you guys so much.
Hello. Are we on?
Yep, look great.
Excellent. So welcome everyone. I am Jorge Ortiz, the director of Zpryme's XR department, which we codename Froliq. And I'd like to introduce Rebekah Diaz.
Hi, my name is Rebekah Diaz. I'm the XR strategist at Froliq and Zpryme. I sidestepped into this emerging technologies industry from a background in ballroom dancing. That led me to the wonderful people at Zpryme, where we started Froliq, the branch of Zpryme that creates these engaging gamified experiences for smartphones or virtual reality headsets. And today we're going to give you all a sneak peek on a new development that we've been working on for Austin Energy. It's about to be launched for beta testing called Austin Energized. So yes, is Mary here with us also?
I am. I just don't know how to get. Oh, I'm
here you are. Thank you, Mary, for joining us. Coming back again. Didn't get enough of you. That last hour in your panel for equity was really great. I was really enjoyed the parts that I was able to tune into. Mary has really been helping us work on and shape this project, the Austin Energized app. So Mary, I just wanted to invite you to say anything that you wanted to about the app before we continue.
Well, this has been like one of the most fun projects I've ever worked on, first of all. And if anybody else wants to get a chance to work with Rebekah or Jorge, like you really should try to like hurry before they're in too much demand from the seminar. The idea behind the projects was that we really wanted to engage our customers, especially children, right? Middle school age children, because the actions of now will ripple into the future and theirs will as well. And like thinking of a way to really let them know that they can actually impact climate change, right? And in a way that's fun, that's showing them, not telling them, that doesn't feel like another classroom experience that they want to just zone out of and go play on their tablet. So it's like, why not use the tablet and the phone in a way that will benefit everybody? So it's been a pleasure.
Awesome. So we are ready to get started, Jorge. If you just want to go ahead and start sharing your screen. Normally, this would be an app that you just download from Google Play or the App Store for your iPhone. But we're going to show it to you from a PC just so it's much easier for you to see in the Zoom meeting. So Jorge, whenever you're ready. Awesome. We're going to go through the tutorial first, and then Mary is going to play the game.
Excellent. And like Becca said, this is a PC version of a mobile device. So one of the features of this app is that users will be able to see what they build in augmented reality, which is virtual reality, and augmented reality is mostly what we do. But in this case, we can't show you augmented reality through a video. So that's what this little information panel is in. But let's go ahead and start a tutorial. This would be the first option that kids will have playing the game. So. Becca, maybe you want to give us a play-by-play of what's happening, just a higher level.
Yeah, sure. So while we were designing the tutorial, Jorge and I and Mary, we all needed to ask ourselves, what does the user need to know? What do we need to teach them about the mechanics of the app? Because we only have about a quarter of a second to give power to the player, where they can think to themselves, I know what I want to do and I know how to do it. So what we're doing here is we're gonna teach them how to just build and place an item. We're gonna teach them how to manage their resources, which is gonna be money, pollution, and happiness.
To help in this, they'll have a few advisors, like a city manager would, saying, hey, this is a good idea because of these reasons. This is a bad idea for this other reason. So, like Becca said, it's a little bit of a resource management thing, in which what you do and build will teach you that it has consequences. So let's go ahead and build this over here. It's a nice little set of houses. So right now, being the tutorial, the options that we have are limited to just the learning phase. So over here, we're gonna build the factory. We're gonna build this one. So availability and use of solar energy was important on this app, and so we included it as part of the tutorial. Then of course we have the resource management of money, pollution, and happiness of the city.
In our beginning brainstorming sessions, we had to ask ourselves, what question do we want to answer with this game? And I think Mary, you set it out really nice for us. We're like, how can we make people be proactive? So on the hidden side, on the hidden side of this app, we designed it so that hopefully the kids can see that, like Mary, you were talking about earlier, especially in Texas, solar does cost more than natural gas. However, there are consequences every time that you make a choice.
So one thing we added for people who, or for users who would like to be more strategies about it, we'll have all the resource trade-offs that you can do and in different types of installations for homes, shops, factories, parks, and entertainment. And we're gonna do the last part. Let's do something in entertainment. It's a recent addition. We figured, I think Becca decided, let's do a skate park because that's a fun addition to that city.
All right,
So,
Mary, are you ready?
I am.
Take us inside the mind of Mary and let us know what choices you're making.
All right. So I am the mayor. Finally. I think the first thing I'll want to do is put a factory. Let's get some money going. And I think this time we'll just go mid-range. Like we'll make it energy efficient. Somewhere outside of the city.
But you know, like your factory is like right on your face?
No, definitely not. Let's try to hide that. But I also really like having parks like downtown so I can go have some lunch. So let's do a park downtown.
Excellent. Right here.
Awesome. Okay. And let's see where we are. We don't have that much pollution. Let's do a house.
Sounds good. You have some options.
Yeah, and let's say, I want to save some money this time. Let's just do a standard connection.
Here.
Oh man, that's some pollution. Uh-oh. Let's see how that did.
Uh-oh.
Oh no. Okay. Sorry, Alex Taylor. All right, since we have some pollution, let me go ahead and add a park to help with that. And let's put it close to the factory. Awesome. So now the workers can go have lunch there. Okay, let's see where I stand now. All right, we're still all right on money, but we don't have a lot of happiness. Let's have some entertainment for the city.
Looks good. Yes. Anywhere? It's pretty cool.
Yeah, anywhere. Oh, yes. So now people can skate and have a picnic. I like that. I like that a lot, especially since we have like Facebook downtown. All right. Yeah, people are happy again. Let's go ahead and get some. Do I want to sponsor a treat day? Yes, absolutely. Let's have a treat day.
It costs you money. Is that good?
Yeah, that's all right. I'll pay the money.
A lot of donuts.
I love it. It looks like Cloudy with a chance of meatballs. All right, let's get a house. We got to live somewhere. And I know we're like spending a lot of money, but I still want to go all the way out. Let's do energy efficiency and solar. Let's go all the way.
Okay.
And let's put that on the opposite side of the factory. So still outside of town, but away from the factories.
Hi.
Yeah, that'll work. Nice.
You can see the solar panels right on the rooftop.
Looks really pretty. Okay. Oh, Earth Day. Wonderful. Kind of expensive.
Seems like you have lots of happiness.
Yeah, but it'll bring down some of the pollution though. Let's do it. Nice.
Seems like you're doing pretty well on this one.
Yeah. Oh, but I'm just spent a lot of money. Okay, well, we need to make some money. So let's do another factory. And, oh man.
So expensive.
I know they're expensive. I think I'm still going to go with solar this time. Hopefully that doesn't make me broke.
Put it across here.
Yeah, that works. Okay. That one's definitely a much prettier factory for sure. All right.
Hey, now you're earning money instead of hemorrhaging it. That's good.
Yes, and we have a lot of happiness going on. Let's put another park in somewhere. Yeah, just anywhere you'd like. I'll let dealers pick.
Next to the new houses.
Oh, we don't. I don't think we put in a store yet, right? Let's.
Not yet.
Yeah, let's put in a store. I think we can.
You have the same options.
Same option. So I'm gonna be cheap. Just say
Yes.
standard connection.
All right.
I really do want to help the environment, but I gotta balance these how much it costs. Let's see how that impacts us. Oh no.
I like how the
Apparently being cheap does not.
I like how the skate park turned into a pool.
Yeah. Okay, let's build another house and let's put some solar on it.
You're doing pretty well. Generally, by this time, I'm like,
I might actually
a
get
lot of
another
money.
term as mayor. Okay. All right. Oh, good. Oh no.
a little bit too much, I guess.
Factories are really making a lot of pollution. Oh man. Okay. That does not look good. No, no one's happy now. Oh, we don't have any money. Okay. So, let's throw a party. Everybody's probably really sad.
That's what I do. Like, I'm out of
I
money.
mean, you're like, it just rained. We gotta
Let's
go
throw a party.
park. All right, let's see what that did.
Oh, you're still
Oh, man,
surviving.
I'm only halfway there. Okay. Bounce back. Let's do a house. And,
Oh, you can only afford the regular one.
man, I only have standard options now. I guess that's all I can do. Let's do it.
Harsh world we live in.
Yeah, it's hard balancing all the
Mhm.
these different values.
At least your happiness is going up.
Yeah, people are very happy.
So you might have like
Broke.
oh,
Let's have another park. You know, maybe it'll help with this pollution.
hopefully.
Hopefully.
And I think you probably run out of money at this point.
I know. Oh no! Can I please give me money?
Throw a final party.
The only thing left I can do is a party. Yeah.
Alright.
Let's have another skate park somewhere. All right. Well, you know,
It's a good run.
it was a good run. I won't get reelected as mayor, but
Hey, you have $76, but unfortunately can't do anything.
I can't do anything.
So I think this is a good run.
All right.
I'm gonna stop sharing now so that we can talk a little bit about what we
Okay.
learned.
Okay.
Good job, Mary.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the better one of the better scores that I've seen. Made it to 14.
Yes.
So this app, it's now in the phase we're about to push it into play testing. And thank you, Mary. You've been helping us play test a lot. And in play testing is where we get to tweak and alter the experience that rises out of the game. Mary, I love how you were just like adding little notes to yourself about like, oh yeah, this, you know, they're gonna go have lunch at the park that's by the factory. I love how you see things like that and are thoughtful like that when you're placing your items. So while we're play testing, then we start to get to fine tune all of the things that y'all just saw to fine tune better to the audience that we're trying to reach, which is middle schoolers, and also fine tune it better, the message that we want to convey. Because sometimes as developers, we're like, oh, this is a great idea. We put it in and then we put it into testing. We're like, not so much. And so we gotta, you know, backtrack and redo a few things.
Like Rebekah mentioned, right now this is gonna enter a beta phase. So if anyone's interested in saying, hey, I would like to test it out on my phone, or I have some ideas for this, that we would just contact us with the info from our panel, and we'll be glad to receive some feedback. One of the things that Becca's been shy about is that she implemented a lot of gamification strategies on this game. So you would think that we could just show someone a city and they're like, hey, this city has problems. But because we are allowing the users, which our audience is like what, middle school, I think so. They have a sense of ownership because they are the major and they are creating the city and they are dealing with all these problems, which I think that's part of what Mary wanted to include on this app, right? It's something a little bit more interactive.
Yeah, and I wanted to encourage a nuanced dialogue, right? To where the future decision makers understand, like, there are a lot of layers to making these decisions, and that it's not there's not always one way to do it, and that everything has its consequences. And so I love the fact that it was just kind of a very iterative process where we'd be like, okay, well, what else do we do, and what else should we do, and how else can we demonstrate that that there are ways that all the decisions have impacts, and without just saying there's cost and there's also happiness and there's pollution and you have to weigh it. And so yeah, it's been a very fun process.
Excellent. Any other thoughts, Becca?
I'm all good here.
All right, so in the next couple of minutes, I'm gonna share my screen again. I don't think I need to share computer sound. We're just gonna show a few of the other Froliq apps that if you've been coming to like the Energy Thought Summits and the like, you probably are familiar with some of those. We have, for example, Electrify San Antonio, that currently is not loading for some reason, but oh, there it is. But it's learning, teaching the audience where the energy comes from, and everywhere from generation to transmission, distribution, and use. We've done some augmented reality, just all-out games in which you just, for example, in this one, it was themed on the moon, so we just made us, an asteroid shooter on augmented reality.
That was one of my favorite ones, doing the ETS 20 asteroids, because it was simple and it was fun.
Excellent. We also have some other AR in which, because you get to use your phone to look into another world, you are the camera. Things like education are on our areas of expertise. History of Energy, for example, is a VR, virtual reality app, in which you choose how to rotate your solar panels in order to maximize efficiency. Water for Humanity is a short interactive virtual reality film that we did about inequity in water access across the world and what we can do about it. VR Bucket Truck is our training app in order to work on an aerial platform vehicle, the ones that cut vegetation and all that. Let's fast forward to something more exciting.
The bucket truck,
Yeah,
moving the levers.
So on this one, you're already on the bucket, moving along, trying to clear some vegetation.
I love how it feels so real. Like, I remember we were just walking out of the office the other day and there was a bucket truck working on the power lines here by the office. And we're like, oh, hey, I'm like, it's like, oh, there it is. I'm seeing it, but I've seen it so much in the pixels, but it still seems so similar. It's all the same. It's the weird reality.
Exactly. We have the lighting challenge, and that's an avatar. That's probably me playing a virtual avatar. And we're just trying to change light bulbs to energy efficient ones on a timeline. And then Not It is another interactive, well, non-interactive film that we put out about just being, walking in someone else's shoes. The Lineman Challenge is just a gamified version of clearing out vegetation without a bucket truck, because so you had to climb like a monkey around very hot wire transmission distribution lines, which I know it's not how it works, but it's a fun game to play. And that's what we have for you. Thank you for being here. And thank you, Mary, for giving us this opportunity to work with Autin Energy and create an app that helps everyone.
Yes, absolutely. So Mary, if you don't have any closing thoughts, I would like to pass it over to Erin so she can lead us into a scheduled break.
Absolutely, Erin.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys. That was a really great presentation. And Mary, yeah, I was very impressed with your performance in the game, and also for sticking around after that great panel that we heard from you too. Actually, all of our panels this morning were great, so thank you all for joining, and thank you to all our speakers so far. We've got a couple more coming up for you, but we are going to take a short break right now. So we will be back at 1:15 p.m. Central Time, so 2 p.m. Eastern or 11:15 p.m. Pacific Time. So take a quick break, get some lunch, get some coffee, and we'll see you back here in about 20 minutes.
Welcome back, everyone. My name is Dylan Lockwood. I'm senior editor at Zpryme, and we're here today for our panel, Innovating Within and Without. This panel is going to cover the different ways that innovation can manifest in the solar and storage industries and the energy industry at large, and how innovative culture and leadership can change an organization, an industry, and even the world. I'm joined here by three great panelists, and I'll let them introduce themselves, and we'll start with my friend Debbie.
Okay, great. Thank you. So it's very nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Dylan. And yeah, so I'm Debbie Brodt-Giles. I'm with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and I'm a group manager there, and I'm managing something called the American Made Challenges, which is a prize series of prize challenges and competitions, as well as a large, robust network of more than 200 support organizations across the United States that are there to help innovators succeed. And so I'm really excited to be here today. I'd love to talk more about prizes and our network, and Zpryme is actually part of our network. So I'm really excited to be here with Zpryme and these other, my fellow speakers today. So thanks for having me.
We're happy to have you. And now I'll pass it over to Autin.
Hey, yeah, thanks, Dylan. My name's Autin Rosenbaum. I'm the founder and CEO of DemandIQ. We're a Denver-based solar software company, and our technology has pioneered instant solar quotes. So our technology is powered by Google Project Sunroof. So we analyze homes and give instant solar quotes to enable better transparency and better education for consumers on the benefits of solar.
We have another founder and CEO here with Heather.
Hi, my name is Heather Hochrein. It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Dylan and Zpryme. So as I mentioned, my company is a EV Match, and so I'm the founder and CEO. Started the company about 4.5 years ago. We are based in the San Francisco Bay Area, and so I'm excited to share a bit more about my journey as an innovator.
Yeah, we're just starting. So we're just starting.
Jason.
And how that relates to kind of innovation within the industry at large. And so what we offer is a peer-to-peer network for electric vehicle charging. So at our core, we are a software platform, and we're taking a unique approach to EV charging by bringing privately owned charging stations into public use through a web and mobile application that provides reservations, payment processing, access control, and really allows individual homeowners as well as small business owners and apartment property owners to rent out private charging assets thereby increasing the utilization and really helping folks adopt EVs who historically have not really thought that this was a good option for them. So renters and folks who live in apartments or don't have access to off-street parking. So really at our core, we are working to increase adoption of cleaner electric cars. And obviously that fits within the solar and storage sector. And many of our hosts have solar as well. And we see electrifying transportation as really a way to decarbonize the transportation sector paired with renewables. So excited to share more. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's a good kickoff for the start of this, where we're just going to talk about how do you innovate in the work that you do. But before I turn that over, let me just say that to the audience that if you have any questions for our panelists over the course of this, please put those in the chat, and we'll get to those a little bit later. So we'll go in the same order. Debbie, how do you innovate in the work that you do at NREL?
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, so I talked a little bit about these prizes, and really the prizes on the surface are very innovative. The federal government normally, it's very hard sometimes to work with the federal government. You have to go through a grant process or, write an idea and wait a long time and do a lot of negotiation for the funding that you get. And then there's a lot of strings attached to some of that money sometimes. And so we're developing these prize programs and the associated network to help our prize competitors be successful, because it is really innovative. It's a way to get people working, partnering with people, getting access to resources at a much faster rate than they can do on their own, hopefully. And also it allows them to get access to capital much more quickly as well. And so for the federal government, it actually reduces our risk of it because we have these folks that are out there and they're working hard and they're proving themselves and they're working through these prize competitions, which are usually phased, and they can make the point that they are creating great partnerships. They have a great idea. They can prove that their idea is something that's needed in industry. And so we then can reward them with a prize once we see that they have done amazing work, right? So it kind of reduces the risk for the federal government and hopefully gets that money in the hands of our innovators much more quickly than we normally could do. I will say there's an open prize competition right now. So the Solar Prize Round 5 competition is open. All of the submissions are due in October. And so I'm really excited about this one because we are in round 5. So we've already done 4 successful rounds of this, but round 5 actually takes it. It's the same Solar Prize that people have known in the past. We're really focused on hardware, but we also have a second track that's focused on software. And so I'm really excited about that. So we could actually entertain some software ideas as well as hardware ideas. And for hardware, there's $3 million up for grabs. And for software, there's $1.6 million up for grabs. And both of the prizes also have the ideas for vouchers so that prize winners can also come work with the national laboratories and our network to get more resources to help their technologies. And so anyway, I'm very excited to announce that. And then, so hopefully you guys can search for that on the web, look for Solar Prize Round 5, and you can learn more. One more thing before I stop talking though, is that I forgot to mention that we're also focused on a new JEDI component. So justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So the software prize specifically has an element to it that you can kind of opt into. You don't have to opt in, but if you opt in and tell us that your software solution helps underserved communities, that is another opportunity to win extra prize money. So anyway, all of that to be said that, I'm excited to work in this field because every day it seems like we're coming up with new ideas and expanding the prize platforms that we have to help innovators across the country.
JEDI is just a great acronym for any program. So Austin, how do you innovate in the work that you do at DemandIQ?
Yeah, innovation is central to my work. DemandIQ has been around for 4 years, going on our 5th. And, the whole time and even before, innovation was something that was important for our success. So what I do is I stop listening to what I would consider peers or competitors. And I think it's really important to just focus on the customer and focus on your gut. right? Focus on the things that you believe to be true, not what other people believe to be true. And ultimately, there's the build, measure, learn principle that has to happen for innovation to be successful. You have to ideate, you have to concept, deploy, then you have to measure that success and then apply those learnings, because to get to what someone would consider to be innovation, you have to take these baby steps to get there, and everything requires incremental improvement until you have a large step change difference. And then obviously asking for feedback. You got to get feedback from your customers. That's the most important part. And then taking what is important of that feedback, distilling the signal from the noise. You'll get a lot of feedback, but not all feedback is good feedback. So taking that good feedback and being able to identify what's good feedback from bad feedback and then incorporate that into the product really allows you to mature that idea. And then I think just the last 2 points that I would drive home are: trust your gut, trust your instinct, trust yourself. Remember, you are the expert. You're doing this because you're passionate about it, because it's something you know a lot about and something that you believe can change things. And so you have to trust yourself. And if you're going to do something different, you can't look at your competitors. You can't look at what else is out there. You have to build from what you believe to be true.
I think that's very sage advice. Heather, you talked a little bit about some of the cool stuff that EV Match is doing, but so how would you say that you're innovating in the space you've made for yourself?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So at EV Match, we are taking a fundamentally different approach to solving this problem of limited charging access. And so really what we've envisioned is this peer-to-peer network where individuals can participate in supplying electric vehicle charging stations to this growing group of drivers who need charging access on a daily basis, who are transitioning from gas vehicles to electric vehicles. And, thus far, single family home owners have had a fairly easy time switching to an electric car. You can charge at home overnight. It's relatively low cost to install a charger. But in markets like California, where I am, or in Texas or Colorado, and most of the US, frankly, you have large percentages of the population that are renters and multi-unit dwellers. So in California, about 40% of the population. And for that group, charging is not easy. It's actually very inconvenient. It can be stressful. And really, we need to create a better solution to expand the demographic of EV buyers. And really, that's essential, not only from an equity perspective, but from a climate action perspective. So essential in order to reach our goals, our state and our federal goals. So I see this as core to the work that needs to be done, but also our approach is trying something new. So rather than just putting more public charging stations in retail locations and workplaces, and that work is important as well, we are really working to leverage existing infrastructure that people have invested in individually, that's in neighborhoods, that folks can tap into, they can walk to, they can find neighbors to charge with on a recurring basis. And really what we're doing is applying the peer-to-peer model that's been very successful in other industries. So looking at transportation network providers or Airbnb, for example, applying that model and leveraging the technologies that already exist and business models that already exist and applying that to this new industry of the need for EV charging. So I think in that sense, it really is an innovation in that we are taking a business model concept that's been successful in other arenas and working to integrate that into this new industry of EV charging.
Thank you, Heather. And so, we're talking about innovation today, which I admit can be kind of a nebulous concept at times. But it's become readily apparent over the last few years and before that due to the new challenges caused by a modern grid and the modern demands that are put on that things need to change, that new things must be tried and that sort of thing. So let's start just by establishing a frame of reference. So Austin, when we talk about innovation in the solar and storage spaces, what are we really talking about? Where's the baseline from which we are innovating?
Yeah, I think frame of reference is really important. Certainly products that were innovative 20 years ago are no longer considered to be innovative today. And also innovation and sort of that frame of reference should also be defined based on the business unit or business types, business sectors, because not all innovation is going to be the same. The rate of progress, the rate of change is going to happen in different silos. And when it comes to solar and storage, I'm pretty excited to share that I think solar and storage is very innovative. And I think it's largely driven by the passion and the market potential. Probably the confluence of those two factors makes solar extremely innovative, even before a time when there was a rush of investment. It feels like today, there's millions, if not billions of dollars rushing into clean tech right now. But even before those dollars were coming in, the passion from our colleagues was driving tons of innovation, right? More so than others. So I think largely when it comes to innovation, what we're talking about is step change differences. We're talking about not these marginal incremental changes. We're talking about transformative technologies, things that will help us to make things more accessible, to reduce costs, to reduce effort, and to improve the environment ultimately. But yes, frame of reference is very important. And fortunately, our frame of reference is that we've got a lot of great tech out there and a lot of great innovators out there.
So Heather, sort of building on what Austin said there, where does innovation come from? Does it come from a certain kind of mindset or from a certain kind of organization? I know Austin said there are certain like market conditions that can make it acceptable for that. So what are the conditions that can best seed innovation?
Yeah, I think that it requires both a certain kind of mindset and a culture or organization that allows that mindset to flourish. So in general, I would say an entrepreneur or an innovator more broadly needs to have a growth mindset. And so I think it's important to differentiate between a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And so growth mindset is one that sees failure as an opportunity to grow, whereas a fixed mindset sees failure as the limit of one's capabilities. And so with a growth mindset, you're thinking of challenges can help me grow. I can learn to do anything that you want. And with a fixed mindset, you're either good at something or you're not, and your abilities are unchanging, and you don't like to be challenged. So those are very different types of mindsets. And many people maybe have historically found themselves to be more of a fixed mindset person and can become more of an innovator over time. It's not a binary. You certainly have the ability to change. And I think certain organizations or cultures or leadership can actually strengthen a team or one's mindset and really build and draw out those types of skills and mindsets that are required for innovation. So I would say that is essential. For context, I created EV Match out of a graduate school project at UC Santa Barbara. I worked on the idea for about a year and a half with a team of 3 other graduate students. And we specifically focused on how can we solve an environmental problem with a business model, and went through the process of interviewing customers, interviewing industry experts, running pilots, and that ultimately led us to this idea. Now, I think that type of work can be developed within existing organizations, not just universities, but it requires some specific allocation of resources and time and acceptance of failure, and knowing that it does require failure and trial and error in order to come up with something new. So I think that it does require both the mindset and the environment to allow that mindset to create something new.
That failure aspect, I think, is actually quite important and not talked about enough. Not just in terms of innovation, but in terms of a lot of problems that can plague the industry. That just like the fear of failure holds people back from being bold in places where sometimes they need to be. So I think that's a very salient point. Does everyone else agree with Heather on that definition, on that sense of where innovation is coming from? Does anyone have anything to add in terms of how conditions for innovation can best be fostered?
actually loved your definition, the growth mindset thing, right? Like, I don't want people to feel like failure is a bad thing. Failure is actually a great thing that we all can learn from. And I do think too, like with these prize programs that we put out, I think in the first couple of rounds, we got people who were just the same people that were in the solar industry. And they're like, yep, I know how to submit to a government agency. I'm going to put my idea in. But what we're really striving for as we do more and more rounds of these is to get more diverse folks into this world, right? Because I think that there's a lot of people that can add to the innovative spirit of what these prizes are about and what our technology needs to be for the new clean energy revolution. So I feel like we're really focused right now on getting diverse people from all backgrounds. And one of my favorite stories is from one of our earlier rounds of the solar prize. We had an artist who came in and he was like, I just think solar looks ugly. So I'm going to, I have some ideas on how to make those panels look prettier. And so he entered the prize as an artist who knew nothing about solar. And then because he was connected to our network and he was starting to learn along the way, and he used the prize, and DOE looked at that, right, and said, normally we would never fund an artist who's never been in the solar industry before, but with a prize, we can give him a small bit of money and see what he could do with it. And so this guy took it, knocked it out of the park, and he really was successful in the prize. And now today he has started his own solar business, and he's making beautiful artistic solar panels. And it's just a wonderful story that I love always sharing, because I think that it shows that somebody could come from a totally different background and be, willing to maybe jump in and maybe willing to fail, but sometimes you succeed and do great things.
Yeah, and Debbie, I've talked with some of the participants and winners of people doing the solar challenge on our podcast, Zpryme on the Grid, available on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts. But that's all about creating networks. How do networks yield innovation in this space?
Yeah, like actually in the example I just gave, right, he needed network help, right? He was a guy that was an artist, but he didn't know where to start. So he actually did a great job leveraging our network. And so he connected himself to past winners of the Solar Prize and to other entities that were in our network. And like I said, there's more than 200 entities there. And you could dive in and get access to incubators, accelerators. You can get help with your business plan. You can get help with prototyping, 3D printing. We have all kinds of help in the network. And so I believe that surrounding yourself with, other people that have other skills that maybe fill the gaps of the skills that you don't have is really, really important, because obviously we can't all do it alone. You do need good people around you. And I think the network is amazing. And like I said, Zpryme is an example of one of our network partners. And I know they're always willing and able to help teams as well. So I think you guys are a great example. And like I said, there's 200 other folks that are in the network. And then we just recently launched a new matchmaking tool that actually will hopefully make matches even better between our innovators and the network. So innovators can say, what their needs are, and then our network tells them what they have capability to do. And this new tool matches them together. So I'm excited to see how that will play out in the next couple of months too.
So Heather, one thing that I always sort of think about when the concept of innovation is tossed around and being ascribed to people and organizations is that, innovation and leadership can often be tied closely together. But are they the same thing? Does one preclude the other? Do you need one to have the other? What is the relationship between innovation and the concept of leadership?
Yeah, I think they're obviously closely related, and many innovators have leadership skills. And ultimately to start a company, if that's the goal of the innovator, and lead a company, you need leadership skills. But I think many leaders are not necessarily innovative just because they are leading an organization or leading a department, for example. And so I think it's important to not assume that because someone is in a position of power that they are truly innovative. As I mentioned previously, I think that's a function of mindset as well as culture. And so some organizations may not be valuing innovation or set up to allow for that kind of risk taking. And therefore leaders may not feel enabled or emboldened to be able to be innovative, even if they personally have the capacity to do so. So I think that there is some limit within an organization, and that leadership piece is key to think about. How can you create innovation among your leadership team? How can you reward that type of thinking and mindset and behavior? In terms of entrepreneurship, I think that's where they're linked very closely, where innovation and leadership go hand in hand. And I think a lot of innovators come into, like myself, for example, I was not expecting to start a company. I did have previous leadership experience, so it wasn't sort of beyond my capabilities, but I wasn't expecting to start a company. And I just became so excited about solving this problem and so passionate about the work that I decided that this was what I wanted to work on. And so I think a lot of entrepreneurs do that. They're really mission driven or driven by the problem that they're solving or the customer that they are trying to solve a problem for. And then they gain leadership skills over time as they start to build out their company. Or they bring in folks they need on their team to round out their leadership team. So yeah, those are my thoughts there. I think they're very closely related, but it's important to not conflate leadership with innovation.
Yeah, that's very true. So Austin, you're also the CEO of a startup. So you've demonstrated innovation and leadership and entrepreneurship as Heather mentioned. So how do you define those relationships between innovation, entrepreneurship, and leadership?
Yeah, entrepreneurship, I think, largely exists because big companies, enterprises fail to innovate. And I think Heather has kind of touched on why that happens, but there's a lack of resource, process, values, culture, all those things get in the way of bringing new ideas into fruition. And I think the role of the entrepreneur is very important. It's to bring these new, often risky ideas from the edge into commercialization. And I think what's really important about entrepreneurship and innovation is that entrepreneurs are really good at finding blue markets or blue oceans for which they can penetrate and bring new products to market. And so a blue ocean is one with a whole lot less competition, or they find a red ocean. They find a place where there's lots of competition. They bring an entirely different approach. A good example of this, and a great innovator that I personally look at, it's not a person, but a company, is the company Lemonade, right? So insurance is a largely commodified type of industry. For a long time, there wasn't a lot of change. And then Lemonade comes in with this tech-driven approach to selling insurance and processing claims and driving that all with AI and technology. And so that's an example of an innovation that came into a red ocean and built a really big business and was very successful in these commodified spaces. And so I think really when it comes down to entrepreneurship and innovation, we have to think about it as either going into a blue market, a blue ocean and being very successful, or going into a red ocean with something that's completely new, completely different to disrupt. So that's kind of the relationship. And then I agree with kind of the same approach with leadership and innovation. And my kind of perspective is that leaders don't have to be innovators necessarily. In fact, probably a lot of leaders are laggards, and maybe those people are laggards because they know that they can continue to be a leader for some period of time by not innovating because they hold some position, some sort of advantage for the short term. But oftentimes those leaders that don't innovate, those ones that are laggards, get left behind. So those are my perspectives.
Yeah, and I guess building on the entrepreneurship angle, we also should make a mention of intrapreneurship as well. The idea of creating a new kind of venture within an organization that can have the backing of the larger organization to try something new. That's another strategy that can be employed in terms of how to innovate from the inside. I'd like to think that one example you can point to for that is you saw earlier with our Froliq app development, AR, VR creation team that we sort of built within the company and have doing their own sort of business now in ways that people don't do. So just nice shout out to them. And to put you on the spot, does anyone else have a thought about entrepreneurship or that sort of risk mitigation? All right. It was just a thought. So Debbie, I want to ask you a question. Since you see a lot of people coming through these programs, can anyone in the space be an innovator if they want? What advice would you give to someone who wants to be innovative in solar markets?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think anybody can be innovative, right? So it doesn't have to be a person that is ready to start their own business and do a startup. I think that there's a lot of people that can play at a lot of different levels. And that includes young people that are just out of, even in high school, right? So honestly, some of our prizes, all of our prizes are open to almost anybody in the United States. So that includes high school students, it includes college students, it includes people that have not started their own business yet. So I feel like anybody can find a role to play that would make them innovative, right? So, and if they have a good idea, then all they have to do really is surround themselves with the right people. And I think that they can make a lot happen with that. So I'd say, yes, anybody could be an innovator. And like I said, they don't have to necessarily want to do a startup in their lifetime. They maybe just want to contribute to one innovative piece of the puzzle. But all of it clearly adds up in the end to really great things and new technologies. So I'd encourage anybody to be an innovator if they have that desire.
And Heather, I want to pass the same question to you about what advice would you give to someone who wants to be innovative in solar storage markets?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Debbie said about networks is extremely important. So especially when you're starting out, thinking about who you know, but also who you don't know and who you're well connected with. And if you're not connected to the right types of channels or investors or other folks on your team, even if you haven't started a company, it's important to build networks and build community so you can tap into resources and understand what skills you don't have and who you can bring onto your team to help build those out. So I would say that for my personal journey, I've been a part of many different networks, both technical, both fundraising kind of focused, but also female founder focused. And I pull different aspects of those networks into my work, whether it's support on product or on marketing or fundraising. And I truly think that we wouldn't be where we are without those networks. So I can't highlight that enough. I would say the other aspect of thinking about, can anybody be an innovator? I do think it's essential to bring that growth mindset in order to be successful, and to understand that you are taking risk and you are trying something new. Also, I liked what Austin said earlier of you're going to get a lot of feedback, and a lot of it is going to be negative. And you have to be able to filter out the real valuable feedback from the noise. So being able to accept rejection, if it's really a new idea, most people are not going to understand it or understand its value initially. Some of that may be timing related. Maybe the market hasn't caught up yet. Maybe it's a little early. I know we faced that in 2016 when I started this company. But to not be discouraged by that idea that people maybe don't get it or they're not supportive initially probably means you're on to something. Because if you're telling people something they've already heard of or they already understand, it's likely not actually that innovative. So I think kind of that willingness to accept rejection or deal with friction is something an innovator needs to be able to accept.
Austin, do you have anything to add on the advice front? I know you've already given us the awesome trust your gut advice and also what Heather just mentioned there. So, but do you have anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think all entrepreneurs should expect failure, but know how to react to failure and pivot. I don't think we've talked about pivoting in this conversation yet, but I think every entrepreneur fails at something, some more grandiose than others. But it's the way that you pick yourself back up and the track that you put yourself on, the trajectory that you put yourself on after you've failed. there's been many times that our business has failed in one way or another, but it's the way that we've built ourselves back up from those failures that have put us in a better position to be able to do what we need to do correctly, or maybe what we were doing was maybe not worth our time. So that's the most important thing that I can share is expect failure, but pick yourself back up to position yourself for success.
Yes, that's all excellent. So I'm gonna just grab a couple audience questions real quick. One thing someone said earlier, I guess this wasn't specifically a question, but there's a good question to be had from it, which is an important part of creating a culture of innovation is how incentives and punishments are designed. So I'll open this to anyone who wants to take it, but how, when you're building like an organization or when you're amending an organization to try and create a better culture of innovation, how can you best design incentives to get the most out of your people? Or like Debbie, have you seen anything from any of the people that have come through with innovative ideas?
I mean, I think obviously supporting those ideas, right? So like Heather was saying, there's a lot of negativity that can come and surround a new idea that nobody has heard of before. But I guess being open to hearing those new ideas and potentially being willing to kind of, move forward with some of them, even if they are a little bit out there, I think is really important. I think really that's why the Department of Energy is really wanting to do these prizes in sort of a phased approach, because like I said, there's sometimes ideas that come in that are like, it's a little crazy. It's not something that we would normally fund, but let's put a little bit of money behind it. We could put in our solar prize round, the first round, you get $50,000 if you win, and $50,000 is enough to get somebody thinking and really partnering with people and using the network and surrounding themselves with the right people and proving that their idea is not crazy. And we've really seen that a little bit of funding can take somebody quite a far distance. So I guess, being open to ideas and then also funding it properly so that they can actually do something with it and make something happen.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The funding piece is key. I think that it's really easy for people to say, oh, that's crazy, that will never work. There's too many barriers. And the only way to convince people typically is to show them rather than tell them that something is possible. And so even if that's a tiny pilot or a proof of concept or a handful of customers who say yes, and that typically requires a little bit of funding. So I would say from the working on entrepreneurship or intrapreneurship in an existing larger corporation, I think there needs to be commitment of funds or resources to ideate and to actually innovate and bring some pilots to market, or at least do a POC. And without that sort of financial backing, these ideas won't go anywhere. So I think that there's that important aspect, and that's where leadership can come in actually supporting innovation.
Another question we had come in from James is that he asks any comments on the importance of working on and with software standards for innovators. He mentions blockchain standard in energy, the IEEP 2418.5 blockchain energy working group, but just in general, we've got two software developers here. I'm curious if you have any comments on the importance of working with software standards.
I'm not dealing with them a tremendous amount, but I do think, everyone is building different tech. And one of the things that, I want to share is that we need more collaboration. And so if we have better standards, you can certainly collaborate easier, more efficiently, more cost effectively if there are better standards. So while I don't deal with any standards today for our business, I do think that they play a role to that effect.
Yeah, and I could speak to standards, not so much this particular standard referenced, but to Open Charge Point Protocol, OCPP 1.6 specifically, which we are building with. and leveraging that open standard to increase the number of networked electric vehicle charging stations that can operate with our software platform. And really what's beneficial for us about leveraging open standards is the replicability and being able to onboard new hardware more quickly and more cost effectively. And what we've seen in the EV charging space is that many manufacturers are starting to use OCPP standards, and that's extremely helpful as like an integrator perspective in reducing our costs and our time integrating these different types of IoT devices. So that's a big benefit.
So what are some of the best, what are some of the best things to keep in mind from your perspective, Heather, when trying to lobby to create or change standards like that?
Yeah, I mean, my experience with OCPP, there is a governing organization that's really been essential for making that the standard, the go-to standard. They're based in the Netherlands. EV Match hasn't played as much of a role on the kind of standard development side, but I know that there have been some major leaders in the space who have made that possible. And it really requires industry collaboration to get alignment of standards and buy-in and having companies use those standards, especially if they're not required. So I can't speak too much more on the development of the standards, but it is important, I think, as an innovator to understand which standards are developing, who's using them, how common they are, and if adopting them for your organization will save time and money.
Thank you for that. Okay, so we're pushing up against time here, so I've got just one last question that we'll run down the gamut for, which is that, so for the solar industry, storage industry, and the utility industry at large to keep up with the increasing demands of the modern era, do you think that what will help propel us is more innovation from more people in the space, or better innovation from people in the space from your perspective? And Debbie, we'll start with you.
Okay, thanks. And I know this sometimes is a cop-out, but I think that it's both. So I think that we need more innovators in the space, because I think there's a lot of people that we haven't heard from yet, right? There's a lot more diverse entities out there that haven't been playing in the space yet. And I think the more people that we get into this world, the better those ideas will become eventually. I also, of course, think there's, the need for better ideas, right? But I think that the more people we have working together, collaborating, like Austin said, I think that will eventually yield better innovation in general. So I guess it's twofold from my perspective.
Fair enough. Austin, where do you stand on the quality and quantity issue?
So I can just speak from solar software today. I'm not gonna lie, there's a lot of new entrants into the space, particularly because of what's going on with the cost curves of solar, combined with the funding boom and clean tech, and all that's good for innovation. I think collaboration is the key to unlocking a better functioning ecosystem. I think a lot of the solar companies have a hard time with their software stack, and really working together is important to make sure things integrate to be able to innovate for the end user. So a lot of the innovation so far in solar has focused on making solar businesses a little bit more efficient, but that hasn't changed like the customer experience. And so if we can lock together some more of this software tech so that it functions better and we collaborate more, I think that will lead to innovation for the end consumer, which is ultimately very important for moving us forward in penetration levels. But yeah, not sure if that fully answered the question, but there's a lot of competition. I'm not gonna lie. There's a lot out there right now.
I totally understand where you're coming from on that. Heather, what's your final word on the issue?
Yeah, I guess I would lean towards we need better innovation as opposed to more of it. And maybe from my vantage point, I see so many startups and ideas because I'm in that world. And many of them, I also see lots of startups where I think the problem that's being solved is not that impactful. And I wish that those smart people were working on problems that are more critical to sort of our society at large. That's a little biased coming in from this industry, but I see a ton of startups related to software, incremental improvements in software and incremental improvements in the way people interact with supply chains, for example, or products, consumer products. And I think if all of those smart minds were working on some of the big problems, for example, solar or storage or EV charging or other social or environmental problems, we would be able to move the needle much more quickly on addressing some of our biggest challenges. The challenge is that we don't necessarily have the funding or incentives to motivate those innovators to work on those problems. And I think this comes back to what was discussed earlier about needing funding to support those ideas. There is a lot of funding for increasing the efficiency of marketing platforms and advertising and so forth for consumer products. And so how do you recruit some of that energy and effort to go into this sector, the clean energy sector? I think some of that needs to come from corporate, large corporations who are looking for innovation, but maybe haven't put enough financial resources into it. And that would actually attract better innovation in this sector and higher quality innovation. So I think that some of that is people following the funding and being realistic about what can get funded and what won't. And that there could be a little bit of realignment of those funding structures that will drive better innovation in this industry.
Well, thank you for that, Heather. And thank you to all of the panelists for being on here today. I know this can get a little esoteric at times, but I think it's important to talk about these ecosystems and organizational cultures and incentive structures so that we can better understand how we're actually going to make these leaps forward. So I just want to thank you all for being on today and everyone for in the audience for listening. And I guess with that, I will turn it back over to my friend Erin, and I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you, Dylan.
Thank you, Dylan. That was a great panel on innovation. Thanks, Austin and Heather and Debbie as well. I'm super excited to introduce our last panel of the day. I'm joined by a ridiculous group of panelists here. You guys are going to get a lot of good information from this one. So please join me in welcoming Duan Andrade from the Solar and Energy Loan Fund. She's the Chief Strategic and Financial Officer. Alex Craigie from Coalition for Green Capital, and he's the Director of the American Green Bank Consortium. And Eric Strago, Connecticut Green Bank. He's the Managing Director. Thank you all for being here today, and I'm just going to get right into it here. So I think sort of this concept of green banks, the title of our panel today is the Green Bank Movement. It's something that's maybe a newer concept for people in the energy industry or other industries, just the general public, but you all have been working in that space for a while. So I first just wanted to ask you, what exactly is a green bank? What do you all do? And Eric, I wanted to start with you since you actually work with the first green bank that's established in the US. So could you just give a short background on what green banking means and the Connecticut Green Bank in general?
Sure thing. Thanks, Erin. So what does green banking mean? Green banking is a way to use market tools to lower the cost to deploy clean energy, or in our case in Connecticut, our mission has just been broadened, so to address critical environmental infrastructure and environmental needs. So once upon a time, and Alex is much more familiar with the story because he lived it at the time, there were many states and many still do, had incentive programs that were meant to drive efficiency, drive renewables, and those worked fairly decently. The problem was that as soon as the money was out the door, the money was gone. And the idea was you can make the same money go much further by instead of giving it away as an incentive, using that to lower the cost of financing. So the end consumer ends up with the same amount of money out of pocket currently, but you end up getting that money back to reuse and do more in the future. So ultimately our model was adjusted, and that's kind of been our model, is to find ways that reduce cost, reduce risk for other players, and crowd in more capital to deploy more renewables.
Great, thank you. So Alex, you actually helped start the Connecticut Green Bank. So maybe you could give us some background on that story a little bit, and then get into what you're doing now at Coalition for Green Capital.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Erin. And thanks to you and Zpryme for putting this panel together. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. So to give you a little bit of background, I mean, maybe just a little history on green banks. We originally, the green bank model was born in 2008 when Chris Van Hollen, who was then a United States representative from Maryland, introduced the Green Bank Act of 2008, and pardon me, 2009. What ended up happening was that I was working on the Obama transition team at the time. And my boss on the transition team is a fellow by the name of Reed Hunt. Reed was Bill Clinton's FCC chair and a real visionary in telecom and energy as well. And we were working to get this green bank model into what was the stimulus package 11 years ago, or 12 years ago at this point. It didn't work. We got, politely rejected. So Reed decided that this was an idea worth pursuing, this idea that Eric detailed, lowering costs, crowding in private capital, and filling gaps in the financing markets where they exist so that we can increase the deployment of clean energy and do so in a way that doesn't compete with private capital, but instead unleashes it. So that's, that was kind of the driving force. We created this organization called the Coalition for Green Capital, which is an international nonprofit. We were pushing for the inclusion of a federal green bank in what many of you probably remember as the Waxman-Markey bill back in 2010, the cap and trade bill that passed the House. We got into the House bill with a $10 billion capitalization. We were very excited, and we drank a little champagne, and then we drowned like rats with everyone else in the Senate when the Senate failed to move on climate in 2010. What ended up happening there is the Tea Party came in, and we took a look around and we said, this is probably unlikely to be a fertile ground for federal climate change initiatives in the coming years. So I was part of a team that I joined folks that were on the ground in Connecticut, including, led by Governor Dan Malloy, and my boss, Commissioner Dan Esty, and then Eric's boss, Brian Garcia, who has been the president and CEO of the organization since its inception. And we got together, and it ended up working out. We passed a green bank bill in Connecticut, 36-0 vote in the state Senate, 139-8 vote in the state House. And we kind of posit that the 8 no's just pressed the wrong button because it was really, a powerful groundswell of support. It's gone on, as Eric will be able to tell you in great detail, to have tremendous success over the past decade. I believe that we just had our 10th birthday, isn't that right, Eric? Back on July 1st, so we're 10 years old, and since then I've been working with green banks on various different projects, including as executive director of the Montgomery County Green Bank, which is based in Maryland. I've been involved in a lot of green bank startup operations, But what I'm currently doing is running the American Green Bank Consortium, which you can think of like a trade association for green banks. We have 21 green banks in 15 states in the district, and collectively we've caused over $7 billion in total investment in local clean energy economies since 2011. So I realize I'm being a bit vocal and droning on in the first couple minutes, but maybe I'll give a little bit of background on some of the higher level trends. Is that okay, Erin, or do you want to move on to the next speaker?
No, you can go ahead and give some trends. I'll just say that it's been quite a wild ride. So it's, I don't think you're droning on at all. It's great to hear.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so if you can talk about some of those trends, that would be great.
I'll keep the droning on. Yeah, so what, green banks, like I said, we've created just a tremendous amount of investment in our localities in the 15 states in the District of Columbia where green banks exist. We use, we use public dollars to drive multiples of itself in public and private investment. Over the course of green bank history, for every dollar of public investment, $3 of private capital have come with it. And that number is poised to grow as the effects of capital recycling come into place or start to truly take hold, as Eric referenced. And we moved to where it hurts in the market. That's what we exist to do. In 2011, for example, it was tough to get financing for even a utility scale solar farm or solar installation. That was hard to do. And that was the kind of thing that green banks would get involved with. Fast forward to today, it's not that hard to get financing for a utility scale solar project. So green banks don't go and charge head first and compete with private capital. We go where there's friction in the market, where there are problems and inefficiencies. So what we're starting to see more and more of is technology specific financing trends with green banks. So like I said, there's a large scale utility solar installation in the Nevada desert. They don't need our money, but what if that has a solar and storage component that is causing some lenders some heartburn? Well, a green bank can jump in and provide subordinated debt to kind of eat some of the risk that private capital might not be comfortable with at this point, even though it's a proven technology, storage is. It's just a perception of risk that we're dealing with. Similarly, there are a lot of problems in terms of the size of transactions. I don't have to tell everybody here, the banking industry is a high fixed cost industry, meaning that it costs pretty much the same in terms of OpEx to originate a $1 million loan as it does for a $100 million loan. And for that reason, a lot of lenders aren't interested in financing some of these smaller ticket projects. A classic example of that is what I call the sub-pay space in terms of solar deployment. It's the level below where it's worth the difficulty of going through the PACE financing process. And I don't mean that's a difficult process. I just mean it requires some work. So say, $1.5 million projects and below. That's a market where green banks step in and provide assistance, whether through a credit enhancement for a lender, whether through co-investment with a lender, or whether through just green bank investment. So those are the types of problems that we're looking to solve in terms of scale of transaction, in terms of technology issues. And then most importantly for green banks moving forward is going to be a focus on disadvantaged communities. That is, and you're going to hear a lot about that from Eric and Dwan, who both have done incredible things in this market. But that's going to be a major focus for green banks for, if I had to guess, would probably be the biggest focus for the next 10 years, because these are markets that are traditionally underserved for reasons that we all know and understand. For whatever reason, folks in disadvantaged communities do not have access to capital at the same level that most others do. And so that's where green banks can come in and do things like alternative underwriting standards. So what I mean by that is underwriting a loan based on utility bill repayment history as opposed to credit score. Creative solutions like that can help us get into individual homeowners in disadvantaged communities, as well as larger scale, affordable multifamily housing projects, electrification in affordable multifamily housing. There's just an incredible amount of running room. And even though, we know that banks have their CRA requirements, we don't often see a ton of that going to green energy projects. And so green banks are here to kind of be the coat over the puddle for private capital as they start to access this market, and we'll lead and do it ourselves if we have to. So it's that's the kind of trends that we see going forward. And then another trend that I see is across green banks is a focus on resilience. It's moving past just climate mitigation and into the climate adaptation space. And that's hard because you generally don't have reliable expected future cash flows coming off of a lot of these projects. And so green banks, including Duana, can tell the story about My Strong Home, and we're finding some creative ways of financing resilience upgrades and trying to open up that market to private capital as much as possible, and getting into that market. So anyhow, that was an extremely long-winded, but thank you for the opportunity, chance to speak about where we're headed with green banks.
No, thank you very much for that overview. I think you've touched on a lot of points that we're hearing about, being Zpryme sort of focusing more specifically on the energy and utility industry, but you talked a lot about points that and topics that we've been hearing a lot about and that are, rightfully coming to the forefront of the conversation. So Duan, kind of a follow up on that, can you give us a little bit of an overview on self and where self fits in, kind of complements the things that Eric and Alex are working on?
Sure, and again, thank you for having us here in this with this amazing panel with you all. And I think both my colleagues here did a great job at just introducing the topic. And of course, we work closely together. We're like family, and I'm hearing Alex, and of course I'm like wanting to jump in and say yes, no, because that's what we do. We cheer each other on. So I am Duana Andrade. I'm the Chief Financial and Strategic Officer of SELF, and I've been with SELF since 2013. And I am going to give a little background and really want to come back to some of the points that Alex was bringing up regarding, number one, making the clean energy economy inclusive for all, which is at the core of our mission, is really kind of getting off of that high tower, and looking up at the pie in the sky and saying, well, what does it really mean to be doing green financing beyond just the numbers and the energy aspect? And it really, for us, it's about people and the impact on people. The second thing I want to come back to and talk about a little bit more is the investment opportunities. So, Alex mentioned CRA banks. Well, our largest investor right now with a revolving line of credit is the bank, is a CRA investment, and I will give a shout out to them, Bank United. And we started with a $140,000 investment 6 years ago with a one-to-one collateral. We have to put up $150,000 to get $150,000. And 4 months ago, we signed a $5 million line of credit revolving that is helping us just grow. So the market is changing. And I think that one of the important things to keep in mind is that green banks are crowding in this capital that Alex was talking about. And I think that we're also reaching our 10-year anniversary this year. And I think it's a moment in which there's finally the intersection between the social justice, environmental justice, capital, climate, everything's coming together in a very good way. And there are funding opportunities out there that we have to take advantage of. But it's always scarce. So I think that being said, I guess I'm going to share some slides very quickly. That's what I was thinking of doing, without getting into too much detail on self, but I do want to talk about self in just introduce self to everybody and show how different green banks can be, because Alex and Eric both talked about like the Green Bank, Connecticut Green Bank, and others that are really have done amazing things and moved millions and millions of dollars through these big projects, including, you know, issuance of green bonds and things like that. And basically they're serving as intermediaries to channel funding towards large scale projects or medium scale projects. Self is a little bit different. Self is the first green CDFI, also Green Bank or member of the Green Bank Consortium in the Southeast United States. And it's actually the first green bank formed by a local government that now is totally an independent nonprofit. And for those of you who aren't familiar with CDFI, we're a community development finance institution certified by US Treasury, which basically means that we have a mandate per CDFI to do 60% of our lending in low and moderate income populations. And that being said, we actually do an average of 74% of our lending in low and moderate income communities. So we have now debunked that theory that it is not, that low and moderate income communities are not creditworthy or that should pay more for capital, and have been consistently kind of punished and taxed heavily by the traditional financing institutions. So Self started with a Department of Energy grant. I know that right now there's a lot of talk about the DOE funding that has been announced. And yeah, we were basically a product of the previous crisis, not COVID, but housing, the housing market at the time. And we started with this grant from the Obama American, there's another A missing, it was the ARA, American Recovery Act of 2009. And we were one of 20 counties at the time, St. Lucie County, Florida, to receive a grant allocation. And I think that of those 20, maybe 5 of the models, innovative financing models that were created at the time survive today. We basically started with a kind of laser focus on clean energy, because that's what the Department of Energy wanted to see, clean energy projects. And the goal of the founder and executive director now, Doug Howard, was to create jobs. So the focus was, let's bring in capital to fund clean energy projects that are going to create new jobs and sustainable jobs in the future. Again, we were way ahead of our time 10 years ago, you know, and the solar piece, even though it's always like that ultimate goal, solar was basically 90% more expensive 10 years ago. So, I mean, it's, you know, or I should say 9 times more expensive. I mean, it was just out of reach for, especially for low and moderate income communities. So it's just didn't make sense to focus on solar. So we always focused on energy efficiency. And the thing that we did differently was that we took the CDFI model and created a micro lending organization to serve low and moderate income homeowners with affordable and accessible capital to basically do energy efficiency, weatherization, insulation loans at an affordable rate. And they are all unsecured. So we do our lending based on ability to repay. It doesn't matter what credit score anybody has, but rather can they repay a loan without putting them at risk. Also, our loans, because they're unsecured, mean that people aren't going to lose their homes if they don't repay. So that was kind of the first innovation. And the second thing we did is about 2 years after we started really operating, which was in 2011. So by 2014, we embraced resilience. Again, kind of ahead of our time, we realized that the market needed more basic things. If we wanted to take the LMI community and make it part of the benefits of the clean energy economy, if we wanted to help them access affordable energy bills and higher and safer homes, then we had to embrace new roofs, impact windows, doors, hurricane shutters, and those basic needs. And then we could think about solar. So we partnered with an organization that now is no longer in operation, but at the time, this organization, My Strong Home, was providing insurance, affordable insurance for those who made these upgrades on their roofs. So we would be able to underwrite the savings of insurance as a source of repayment for the loan. So again, as Alex was mentioning, one of the things that green banks do really well is we innovate. So we're able to take an idea and say, well, what if we consider the cash flows from the insurance savings as part of the repayment source for a loan? Well, let's do it and see what happens. And it worked out well. So we started to do much more roof, hurricane impact windows and doors. So basically embraced a sustainable approach to our lending. And what we really want to do ultimately is we want to make the clean energy economy more inclusive for everybody, but we really want to provide those benefits to the homeowner. We are really focused on the residential sector. And that means savings on energy, increased safety for climate events, and most importantly, increased health, which is something that we saw in the last year with COVID, is that people really started to fix up their homes, having shelter in home, and that health was a main component of what we're doing. And you know, that connection is just coming to light now, and more people are focused on that as well. So Self to date has raised about $26 million. We're one of the smallest green banks, but we do small loans, average size, $9,500 per loan. We are leveraging about $90 million in projects. And the way we do that is through, for example, getting a $5 million grant from JP Morgan Chase, which is going to then leverage $65 million for affordable housing units that have energy efficiency and climate resilient components. These projects are developed by the Land Trust. We are just the financing entity, but we provide equity financing with these grant funds. We also work with a network of contractors of over 500 or 600 contractors in Florida, Alabama, South Carolina, where we have small footprint, and Georgia, where we're opening up now. And we've deployed, well, now we're up to about $19 million in unsecured loans, about 2,100 projects. 74% of our clients are LMI, and we have consistently had less than 2% default rate. So again, I just, you know, we're really proud of our clients, not of us, but of the fact that people are proving that they are credit worthy despite credit scores. By the way, about 56% of our clients have less than 620 credit scores. So again, this is the, you know, substandard for banks, but it's really where we want to work. So this is our mission, basically, to empower and unserved, and to rebuild and empower underserved communities through affordable and innovative financing for sustainable property improvements. And as a green bank, one of the things that we love about being a part of the consortium and being in this movement is that we get to innovate and customize programs. So here's an example of a grant that we were able to get with the help of Alex and through the consortium, really. This is the a Leon Lowenstein grant that is allowing us to pilot the first solar PV project in Miami-Dade County on a public housing building. So the Sunshine State is ground zero for policies, right, that help any green projects. So green banks come in, like Alex was saying, and fill those gaps and say, well, regardless of policy, we're going to figure out how to move the needle on green energy, how to reduce carbon emissions, and how to help people reap the benefits of the clean energy economy. So we're able to get this a small grant, and we're basically piloting an emergency response system. So we don't have enough money in this pilot to solarize the whole building. What we're doing is we're solarizing the emergency access points, like the hallways. We're switching out all the lights to LED, reducing the energy demand, and we are solarizing and adding a battery storage component so that when a climate impact occurs, which it will because we're in Florida, and the power goes out during hurricane season, then the main hallways, one elevator shaft, and the admin office where 92 elderly low-income people have their medications will all have power and not rely on bags of ice being hauled over to the refrigerators while in the middle of a hurricane or a power outage. So this is something that we are really excited about. We just opened the proposals for this, and we should have some results in a year. It's going to take us a year. And by the way, this is another example of how green banks leverage capital, because the Leon Low and Seed Foundation was $200,000, but then Miami-Dade said we're going to put up another 400,000 or up to 500,000, sorry, for a solar roof, a solar ready roof. So immediately that's leveraging capital. And of course, there's a lot of partnership work being done around this, and awareness and communication education. So it's a pretty cool project. And then we just have these residential solar loan options. So again, Alex was talking about, you briefly mentioned the on-bill payments. So one of the models to be able to provide solar for LMI communities, for example, would be looking at utility, history repayment rather than credit repayment. And that works really well where utilities are willing to work with these models, which is not everywhere. So green banks really adapt and kind of customize their programs, obviously, to where they're operating in. In Florida, we cannot do PPAs, for example. It's very difficult to think of one of the IOUs, utilities, allowing us to do on-bill payments for these small loans. So what we do is we create these flexible loans with a combination of capital that usually is, in our case, combined, blended with the CDFI funds, federal dollars, that allow us to blend that with private capital from our CRA bank investment. That helps us bring the cost low, but it also helps us assume a little more risk, and it helps us also create these new projects and have loan products that are accessible and available. And we also have all sorts of other programs available to LMI residents. So just to finish, this is just a picture of one of our typical clients. He's an OEUS postmaster, and during COVID, he was one of those local heroes, along with our teachers and janitors and bus drivers, and that's really the market that we serve. According to United Way, 40% of Americans are ALIS, which are asset limited, income constrained, basically working class families that are not poor enough to access grants to make these types of home improvements, but not rich enough to access fair capital either. And we're really talking about the average working class American. And here's an example of Mark, who could not access a loan at less than 27%, and we were able to give him a low cost loan for his solar rooftop PV system, and he's very proudly there standing in front of his sign. So with that, I'm gonna hand it back to Erin.
Thank you, Dawn. Thanks for that overview. There was so much in there that we can follow up on, but it's just great to hear about all the good work that you all are doing. Eric, I wanted to follow up with you on that. I think Dawn touched on it a little bit, but could you talk a little bit about how green banks can sort of accelerate the adoption of newer clean technologies like solar and now storage that you're seeing more of?
Absolutely. It's something that we've done in terms of solar in the state. And we're in the process of thinking about right now in terms of battery storage. So going back to our inception, the Green Bank just kind of out of due to the nature of the organization that we evolved out of, we became the administrators of the state's solar incentive program, where we designed a declining block incentive that we cost recover from the utilities, that basically lowered the end cost of solar to homeowners, and really just kind of grew the contractor community, grew the necessary elements of that market as it was, as it kind of matured. And so we did various things going back to the heyday of solar, where we were one of the states that really founded the practice of Solarized and Solarized campaigns, which are a community-based marketing effort where it's much more outreach focused as opposed to somebody just running a commercial saying, hey, put solar on your roof. We had solar ambassadors and people in the community that they could talk to say, hey, here was my experience. This is how much I saved, or here were the pitfalls, or yeah, you get over the fact that you don't like the way that it looks on your roof, or whatever that may be. But we also were really in tune with the contractors and what were their needs. So do we need to do some demonstration projects and provide technical assistance to kind of get things over the hurdle? And we've really applied those lessons as we've gone, as we've tackled more challenging market segments. We've drawn on those lessons. So in our affordable multifamily space, which is, I think, probably the most challenging segment of any of our markets, we've gone back to that in terms of what do we need to do in terms of contractor outreach, what do we need to do in terms of providing technical assistance. And then we're constantly looking at the market and seeing, where is the market really reaching everybody? So to a lot of the point that Alex made and Dwan echoed about being inclusive and really serving the underserved, I think it was 2015, we looked at our solar program and said, you know what, this really isn't hitting everybody. Not everybody's participating. We have a huge disparity between affluent communities and the underserved, and we need to do something about it. And we issued an RFP for somebody to come in to the state, or for anybody that wanted to come into the state and work with us through some targeted guidelines to really build, to really target that market in LMI communities. And Posigen out of New Orleans created their second market outside of the state of Louisiana, or their first market outside of the state of Louisiana, in Connecticut. And because of this, they really helped us open up that market. And at this point, we're beyond parity. That more of our solar now is being installed in underserved communities than in affluent communities. And so a lot of what we've done is just paying attention to those market discrepancies. Now we're looking at battery storage. Last week, our electricity markets regulator, the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, issued an order where the Green Bank is the lead administrator with the two investor-owned utilities in the state for what I think is at this point the largest battery storage incentive program in the country. We're due to deliver 580 megawatts of battery capacity by 2030. And it's, I'm sitting here thinking, oh my God, what are we gonna do? But we're gonna go back to the early days of solar, and we're gonna lean on the same tools that we use there in terms of installer engagement, manufacturer engagement, training, job training where it needs to be in terms of the electricians. What do they need to know to be certified to install a Tesla versus a Sonnen battery? And what do we need to do to provide that? And then battery storage is something that's harder to understand for a consumer and is less visible than solar. So what do we need in terms of demo projects? What do we need in terms of resources for consumers, both residential and commercial, to understand this? And then just partnering with other groups in the community. We talked about crowding in capital. Now it's time to crowd in everybody to learn about what we're offering the market and to build that marketplace.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that collaboration piece, we heard a lot about that on our solar equity panel this morning. So it's great to hear you talk about that too. Alex, I wanted to go back to you. You mentioned, you know, your deliveries here, of course, right now. You know, your early celebration, and then kind of having to backtrack on that during the Obama administration. But I know there's another bill making its way through the House right now, and I was hoping you could give us just a quick overview on what that is, the Clean Energy and Sustainability Accelerator, and then also, is it more likely to pass this time? What's going on there?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked. I actually have a little bit of news on that that I'll save till the end just to give folks a little context here. So yeah, we have bills in Congress to create a national green bank. In the House, as you said, it's called the Clean Energy and Sustainability Accelerator, and in the Senate, it's called the National Climate Bank Act. It's a really popular concept. It's no other way of putting it. It's passed the House 3 times already, actually twice last year and once last Thursday. The bill would capitalize a $100 billion clean energy and sustainability accelerator, which would function as a national green bank. It would do 3 things. It would fund state and local green banks like my 2 friends here that already exist. It would create and fund state and local green banks where they do not yet exist. And it would be empowered to participate in project finance directly on the federal level, straight from the accelerator itself. The bill has gotten a lot of traction. As I said, passed the House 3 times. We're a bipartisan bill. We're co-sponsored by Representatives Brian Fitzpatrick and Don Young in the House. Don Young, you don't representative from Alaska, deeply conservative. You don't see him on many climate provisions, but this is something that we can all kind of agree on. This concept of the green bank, of using public money wisely to unlock private investment, and making sure that the clean energy transition reaches those across. It reaches folks equitably, and then also making sure that this is a transition that's driven by, first and foremost, the private sector with support from the public sector. It is a bill that Senator Harris, then Senator Harris, now Vice President Harris, co-sponsored when she was in the Senate. President Biden included the accelerator in his American Jobs Plan, which was the outline for his infrastructure package. To kind of level set on where we are right now, the current federal strategy in the Senate, which is the place of consequence at the moment, is that there's going to be a bipartisan infrastructure bill, a relatively modest package, if you can call hundreds of billions of dollars modest. Then there's also that package is intended to pass with 60 votes with Republican support. And then there's also going to be a reconciliation bill that is hopefully can attract 60 votes, but because of reconciliation only requires 50 votes. And that will be a larger package of climate provisions that could, that will, if passed, have a dramatic impact on climate in the United States and around the world. And I'm pleased to share that just literally as we've been on this phone call, it's started to leak out to the press that the accelerator is included in the budget reconciliation package that has been crafted and agreed to through the process, through the budget committee chaired by Senator Sanders. I'll screen share a little tweet here so you don't, it's not just, you don't have to take my word for it.
Breaking news, y'all heard it here first.
Yeah. So yeah, we've got a Clean Energy Accelerator right here. So it's a fairly esoteric process that has to go through. So the budget has to be passed, and then the reconciliation bill is intended to include all these things. So we're by no means across the finish line yet. That's when the president signs the bill with a pen. So we've still got a ways to go, but this is a huge step in the process, and we're delighted to see this movement forward.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that live update. All right, we've just got a few minutes left before we get into our networking session. So I'm going to jump to my last question, which is for each of you. So Eric, maybe we can start with you. And the question is, what are some of your current projects that you're working on that you're most excited about?
Oh, so I'm excited yet fearful of battery storage, but that's the that's the latest and greatest. Another one that we're working on is around democratizing green investment, and while that's not one of our stated goals, it couples with everything else that we're doing quite well. So as part of our cost recovery for our solar incentives that I mentioned earlier, we designed that program to be creditworthy in terms of capital markets for bonding. And so we issued our first green bonds in 2019, and then we took a step back from that issuance and said, you know what, we had one really large Bermuda-based insurance company that bought this bond that doesn't really care anything about it being green. There are plenty of people in the state of Connecticut and across the US that are really interested in doing things to grow the green economy. What can we do to help them invest? And so we issued smaller denomination municipal bonds last year in the middle of COVID. We did that another issuance this year. And the minimum investment was still pretty high. I mean, it was down from the standard $10,000 down to $1,000. And now we're looking at ways to how do we make that even lower and crowd in more capital and really bring everybody along with this. So it's giving people the opportunity to earn a return from the green economy and see that side of the benefits as well. The other really interesting thing that we have going on here is looking at our expanded mission. Our legislature about 3 or 4 weeks ago passed a bill that our governor signed last week that expands our scope from purely clean energy to all environmental infrastructure, which is defined as water, recycling, parks and recreation, agriculture, and critical environmental infrastructure, which is still a little vague for us. So there are lots of things that, there are lots of ideas floating around, which is a really cool place to be. And now we're trying to sift through them in terms of what's good, what's bad, what's feasible, what do we need to come back to in 2 years' time, and really see how we can apply the lessons that we've learned over the past 10 years towards the next 10. So.
Thank you for that. And it also sounds like we need to have a joint birthday party or joint 10-year anniversary party for you all.
Oh yeah.
Dwan, what about you?
Well, it's great to hear everything that Eric was just sharing, and I love that term, democratizing, the clean energy economy. I think we refer to it as creating a more inclusive economy, and really for us, that's been our mission from the very beginning, all of us here. But I mean, just that idea of including not only, the people that you're serving, but the people that are investing, and not only, again, these big, kind of sources of funding, but getting people excited about participating in this. And here's the thing, that the people that could most benefit from what we're talking about really are at the middle class and low income communities, because they're the most heavily energy burdened, They're also the ones that are hit by climate impacts disproportionately. They're also the ones suffering from climate gentrification. They're also the ones that are paying disproportionate costs on financing, right? So all of this makes a lot of sense to really uplift everybody and make this economy really more equitable, not equal, but equitable, right? So on that tone, we are really excited about opening up Atlanta, Georgia. We are, again, just innovating in terms of getting together in partnership with the Atlanta Housing Authority. We haven't really made an official announcement. So again, this is like sneak preview to everybody on this call, but we're trying to crack the nut on how to motivate landlords of affordable housing rental units to make clean energy investments that are going to reduce the energy burdens for low income tenants. So again, you know, not leaving the benefits up here, but really making the benefits go down all the way down to those that can use it the most. Low income renters are typically left out of the equation. So that's one of the things that we're going to be launching in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that announcement. We got a nice approval for an investment. Again, I can't really announce more than that, but it's coming. The other thing we're really, really excited about is creating a housing and impact capital fund. So basically, we are now looking to participate in capital stacks for affordable housing developments. And this is kind of, I have a sense of urgency with this because we find that affordable housing capital is out there. Alex talked a little bit about this. I think Erin did too, where you can get capital from the private market to do these big development projects. But the missing piece is when you want to really push developers to do the clean energy, the solar, the climate resilience piece that is going to really make that affordable housing unit affordable to operate in the future, is that there's a piece that's missing of the capital. And that piece that's missing after, you know, you raise 90% of the capital and you have the asset in first position and all that, then you have a piece that comes in from private capital, venture capital that's very expensive. So by us participating in that piece, 10 to 15% of the capital stack with low cost, flexible financing, we want to unlock the opportunities for developers to really build in maximum energy efficiency, maximum climate resilience, and hopefully solar. So we're looking at some projects that are master metered solar projects outside of Florida, but we're looking to participate in those capital stacks to really prove that this is also something that we can do in terms of unlocking opportunities. And I think that the last piece is really the solar piece, the solar and battery piece for the average person. Let's make that affordable and accessible. And I think that's coming. And I think we're going to be right there ready to create whatever financing product that we need to make it accessible for everybody. And in Florida and, you know, the states that are hit by hurricanes every year, it's going to be critical to have that storage component accessible and affordable. So that's it.
Yeah, definitely. And congratulations on your Atlanta opening. All right, Alex, you will get the last word. What are some projects that you're excited about?
Well, I would say that there are some individual projects, but I would say probably one of the things I'm most excited about is a programmatic shift at the New York Green Bank. The New York Green Bank, just for context, is the largest green bank in the country. It's capitalized with $1 billion. It's built out its portfolio. It's committed $1.3 billion in public money, and that includes the effects of capital recycling, which is why it's over $1 billion. To cause over $3.3 billion in total overall investment. It's a big organization. It's a real respected financial institution in New York, and it works really well. What the New York Green Bank has decided to do is to start to pivot and give more of its focus toward disadvantaged communities. You know, it's had a tremendous amount of success in these large, what I describe as wholesale capital provision transactions. It's going to start putting a lot more focus on serving disadvantaged communities with its large-scale capital base. An example of that is a transaction that just went through where the New York Green Bank provided construction to perm financing for a series of solar installations on 18 affordable housing units or developments in New York City. And the savings that are going to be realized from these solar installations will be used to pay for high-speed internet for the residents that live in those buildings. It's a really elegant and replicable solution that hopefully we see a lot more of going forward. So that's an example of the type of work that New York is looking into. There's also a big focus on electrification work in affordable housing. That's a really hard area to crack. It's difficult for private capital access because a lot of things have to go on when you're talking about electrifying affordable housing. Generally speaking, you have to have a loan that allows you to do what I think of as the 3-step. You have to bring the property up to the starting line, as the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative describes it, by remediating lead in the building, by taking out asbestos, by getting it up to code. And that takes money that is not going to be repaid. The second step is that you've got to do energy efficiency. So you right size the load within the building because you're putting in a lot of electrical appliances and you don't want to have to upgrade electrical components outside of the building. And then the third piece of it is you replace 4 key appliances, you swap out for electric appliances. And that's really like a whole package that green banks can be involved with delivering. So that's a shift sort of programmatically. I would say that there are, we have within the American Green Bank Consortium, we've identified $21 billion of pipeline for projects and programs that green banks could make happen, but currently don't have the capital to make happen, further buttressing the argument for this federal accelerator. And there's some really exciting ideas and continuation of existing projects in there. You've got a lot of focus on that sector that I was describing before, the small commercial solar sector. You've also got a lot of focus on disadvantaged communities, solar and storage on tribal lands. There's just a whole host of different products and programs that can be offered for clean energy upgrades that green banks stand ready to provide. With any luck, we'll be able to really take our impact to scale because, $7 billion of investment caused, as I said earlier, we're very proud of that. That's taken a tremendous amount of hard work. We got to put a bunch of zeros behind that if we want to really put a dent in climate change and work on making this a more equitable energy systems in America. So we're hopeful for a federal accelerator to help us do that task.
Can I just add something, Erin, before you go on? Just as a final note, I think there's a lot of doubt, green banks, how do they, are they really, like financial entities that are sustainable, about the sustainability of our entities. And I just wanted to add to Alex's last comment that on average, I think green banks are leveraging capital 3 to 7 to 8 times. So for every dollar we receive from either the CDFI fund or a federal funding source or philanthropic, we're able to raise typically 7 to 8 times more. So keep that in mind, as people think about this green bank movement. No, we're not reliant on federal funds or grants. No, we are using these funds to catalyze all sorts of private investments. And I think it's just an important point to make before we kind of log off here.
Yeah, and if I can even jump on that one, sorry to pile on here.
Or just go on and on.
Yes, no, it is. We're tag teaming it like we usually do. I'd point further to green banks' increase in self-sustainability ratio. And I'll share my screen to just kind of share a snippet from our annual report, which you can find at greenbankconsortium.org. But as you can see, the self-sustainability ratio, so earned revenue, we're not talking about revenue streams that come as a result of a government program or a utility program. We're talking about revenue that is derived from operating activities. Fees, administrative fees, interest receivable, all these types of things are earned revenue. And across the consortium, we've seen this ratio grow up to what is now 0.7. So this is not just, as Dwan's saying, this is not just putting money in a wood chipper. This is putting money in a financial institution that is having massive impact and is inching ever closer to self-sustainability.
Great.
Bill, I should pile on too to that and say, yeah, sustainability is right at the heart of our mission. And I always say, like, look, if we can't show that we're making a return on this, why should anybody else? So I think it's important to keep our own sustainability in mind as we're doing this.
No, thank you all for those last points. I agree. It was very important to discuss. I feel like I could keep asking you questions and you guys could keep the conversation going for the rest of the afternoon, but unfortunately we have come to the end of our time. Thank you, Dwan, Eric, Alex, for joining me today at Solar Storage Fest. Thanks everybody else for joining throughout the day. This was our last panel of the day, but we do have a short networking coming up. If you're sticking around for the networking, you don't have to do anything. We'll be placing you into breakout rooms, and then we'll kind of switch the breakout rooms around after a few minutes, so people get a chance to chat with everyone. So that's all I've got for now. Thank you all for joining, and we will see you tomorrow at Solar Storage Fest.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.